So you know how I'm incredibly confident and definitely not awkward or unsure of myself in any way whatsoever? Well, it wasn't always like that. It's still not, actually, but it used to be worse. My self-confidence probably reached its lowest point around the 8th grade, which might sound pretty scary to any Sevies watching, so real quick, if you're struggling with self-confidence, I just want to say, it gets worse. Anyway, my 8th grade year, and also all the others, were filled with me not knowing how to act or what to do in pretty much any situation, which led to a ton of embarrassing moments that I can make into a video score. One time, I got a pimple in my ear that itched real bad. The whole day, I was doing everything I could to ignore it, but when I was sitting in history, it just got way too distracting. So I gave it a little scratch. I did everything I could to clean up the blood before anyone noticed, but I didn't just pop the pimple, I replaced it with a blood faucet. I asked the teacher if I could use the bathroom, and he was like, no. But then I said, yeah, but I'm bleeding out of my ear. So he was like, fine. Another time, that same teacher sent me to sit in the hall for like 5 minutes. I don't remember why. I was probably talking too much. It's not important. I ended up falling asleep in the stairwell and woke up when the bell rang like half an hour later. I went back into the room to grab my stuff, and the teacher was like, oh, I forgot about you. Actually, that was probably more embarrassing for him. At least I got a sweet nap out of it. One day I was doodling on my homework in math class. I was a couple years ahead in math, so I was the youngest kid in the room, and I didn't really know anyone. Some people would use that opportunity to be charismatic and make new friends, but I decided to be socially awkward and talk to nobody. Anyway, I doodled my name like this because I think it looks cool, and the girl who sat next to me was like, whoa, do my name. I didn't know her name. I've never been great with names to begin with, and this was the only class I had with her, but we were at least halfway through the school year. I definitely should have known. But you can't just tell someone you've been sitting next to every day for months that you can't remember their name, so I told her to do it herself. She never talked to me again. I panicked, okay? I didn't want to be rude, but I couldn't bring myself to admit that I didn't know her name, even though that probably would have been less embarrassing. Wait. Most of the moments I was mortified about during school were actually not a big deal, like at all, and I was dumb for thinking anyone cared, because they didn't. But at the time, I would have switched schools just to avoid anyone who ever saw me, like, accidentally walk down the wrong hallway, which isn't a super embarrassing thing to do, and everyone's done it at least a few times, but it's happened enough to me that if you added up all the mild embarrassment, there might be more than from any other single dumb thing I've done. I wonder how many miles I've spent walking the wrong way. I've probably burnt so many calories. There were a few ways I'd try to cover a mistake like that. I'd check my phone and pretend that I'm turning around because of a text, or I'd just commit and keep walking down the wrong hall, take the stairs to the 2nd floor and loop all the way around back to where I actually needed to go. I'd waste a ton of time just to avoid people seeing me backtrack. What's wrong with me? I was talking to a friend about this, and when I asked how she'd cover, she was like, oh, if I ever went the wrong way, I'd just turn around. Get out. Looking back, I'm more ashamed of the things I did to avoid embarrassment than the things I was trying to avoid in the first place. So I guess there's another lesson for you. It gets even worse. Like this one time, I was heading to my locker after lunch, and when I rounded the corner, this girl jumped out and scared me. I screamed in the highest pitched girly girl voice you've ever heard. I probably broke a few windows. Of course, the girl who spooked me was laughing after a successful spook, so I tried to laugh it off with her. At that point, I might have escaped with only mild embarrassment, but someone else walked up and asked what was so funny. It would have been so easy to say, I screamed like a girl, but oh no. 8th grade Timtom went to incredible lengths to avoid embarrassment. So, in an attempt to dodge the question, I just laughed harder. I can't answer the question if I'm busy laughing, right? But the harder I laughed, the more everyone around us wanted to know what was so funny. I was drawing a crowd. Crap. The more people wanted to know, the more I wanted to avoid explaining anything. And I had very few options other than to just keep laughing. After the lunch bell rang, we had 5 minutes to get to class, and it took about 1.5 minutes to clean up and start heading to my locker, which means I stood there fake laughing for an eternity. I was in too deep. The longer I waited to explain, the higher their expectations were. My only hope was to just wait them out, and I am not a quitter. I laughed like my life depended on it. I laughed harder than anyone has ever laughed in the history of mankind. My eyes were tearing up, I was clutching my sides, I lost my balance and slid down the wall. I made sure the entire school could hear me. I might have overdone it. Eventually, everyone went to class, and I was left alone on the floor of the hallway. They all probably thought I was the weirdest kid in school, but hey, at least nobody knows I scream like a girl. When I was like 15, a news channel did a story about a crazy fad sweeping the globe. It involved running, climbing, jumping, and most importantly, doing sick flips. It was called parkour, and it looked sweet. I went online and found videos of people doing parkour set to over-the-top electronic music with tons of unnecessary edits and effects. There were even videos shot in my city at places that I had been to. Some guys from Boise called themselves Team Paradox, and their videos might have been the coolest thing I had ever seen. Mostly because I knew the places from the videos, but I liked editing videos, so if I learned how to do parkour, I too could make parkour videos set to electronic music with tons of unnecessary effects and be just as cool as them. So I did more research. I found sites listing moves and how to do them. Team Paradox even had their own website that listed the best spots around town. Web design and parkour? What can't they do? I don't know why, but so many things about this just tickled my little nerd brain. I had discovered a secret world that existed completely unknown to most, a mere shadow to the unenlightened, a parallel universe that only a select few could enter. That was essentially just me realizing, oh cool, I can climb on stuff. But it felt like something bigger. There were others out there, and they too could climb on things. I was afraid to try parkour alone. Besides, if I was gonna ask my mom to drop me off downtown, I'd need to convince someone to go with me. I asked some friends, but none of them could understand why I was so excited. They said it looked dangerous and might require trespassing. Cowards. So I asked even more people if they knew anyone else interested. My friend Brody, oh hey Brody, gave me a name and a phone number. Alex was a year older than me, and word on the street, he was a parkour beast. So I called his house and asked his mommy if he was home. It felt weird just cold calling someone to ask if they wanted to train together, but Alex just so happened to be looking for other parkour beasts to train with, and my disappointment in my friends for not taking this seriously convinced him that I was that beast. So he agreed. He'd soon find out that I was garbage, but don't worry about that. He also gave me the number of another person who might want to train. Gary lived pretty close to me, and when I called him, he agreed to meet me at the swing set that weekend. I sat on a swing nervously. I had no idea what he looked like. That guy doesn't look like he's waiting for anyone. Those people all know each other. This was a bad idea. He's probably not even coming. I should go home. But before I left, I saw someone walking on the path to the swings. He was wearing sweatpants and looked just about as nervous as I felt. This was it. Oh man, what if I walked up to this guy and he wasn't Gary? That was his name, right? What would I even say? This is embarrassing. I should leave. Gary walked up to the wood chip surrounding the swing set and paused for a moment before busting out the sickest flip I had ever seen. That was the first time I had ever seen someone do a flip without like a trampoline, and I was in awe. I went over to introduce myself, and we've basically been best friends ever since. Finally, I had someone to make sick parkour videos with. For the next several years, we trained and practiced parkour at every possible opportunity. We honed our craft and pushed our mortal bodies to their limits. There were these handrails on one side of our school, next to the door without a doorknob, and during lunch we would go practice vaults. I don't mean to brag, but I do a pretty mean reverse vault. Most kids did not see the appeal and would sit on the little grassy hill overlooking the rails, making snide remarks. But joke's on them. If they thought that was cringy, just wait till they find out I'm a YouTuber. On weekends, we'd go downtown to train and hang out. Gary and Alex are ridiculously skilled and would do all sorts of flips. I was too scared to push myself and risk getting hurt, so I never got my backflip down. Maybe one day. If you're gonna practice flips, it's really important to have a safe place to land, like a big old cushion. The problem is that when you're swinging through the concrete jungle, there's not usually an abundance of cushions laying around. But one day, we happened to cross a mattress behind a parking garage. I wasn't about to sleep on it, but for breaking falls, it'd do. I practiced a front flip or two. Gary did acrobatic stunts that'd make your brain explode. The usual. The next week, we went back to the same place to find the mattress had been hauled away and replaced with a new mattress, which was great. 2 weekends of flip practice in a row. The next week, the same thing happened. In fact, every time we went to the mattress spawn point, an entirely different mattress was waiting for us. I'm talking Tempur-Pedic, memory foam, crib. The parkour gods were smiling upon us. We got into all sorts of places that most people didn't even know existed. Just about any building I wanted to get on top of, Gary was more than happy to co-sign my bad decisions. The Albertsons down the street from our school had a couple pipes running up the side that you could climb to the roof until they added a security camera. There must have been so many security systems sold because of us. I bet that really stimulated the economy. We're such good citizens. Now, there are some buildings that didn't have pipes or fire escapes or anything, and clearly, the only way to appreciate the views those buildings had to offer was through the use of a grappling hook. Gary and I always joked that anything is possible with a grappling hook, but we never got our hands on one, which honestly probably kept us from getting hurt. The only time I ever did get hurt, I wasn't even on X Games mode. I was trying to do a Kong vault under a horse statue, but I clipped my knee. I sat down on a park bench and there was blood, but the cut wasn't that deep. Anyway, some lady walked up and kept saying I was gonna need stitches, but when I told her no, really, I'll be fine, she shouts, "You need Jesus." So that's the Jesus bench. I think the most insane stunt anyone in the group ever pulled was when Alex did a flip from the 4th story of a staircase to an adjacent building. The first time he did it, he didn't even warn anyone that he was about to. He just ran at the railing, dove over it backwards, lands the flip flawlessly on a roof that I didn't even know you could get to, all the while yelling, "Die!" I looked down to the street and some narc was looking up at us on their phone. I was pretty sure he was calling the cops, so I told everyone to bail. And the way I like to tell this story is that when a group of parkour kids decides to go somewhere, it doesn't take long. So we made it to the other side of downtown in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Whatever that means. But that was a really good spot, and everyone said he probably wasn't calling the cops, so we headed back. We made it across town twice, on foot, well before the cops showed up. But they did show up. The cop gets out of his car and says, "I hear you kids are jumping off buildings up here." And in a moment of brilliance, Alex looks over the edge and goes, "You'd have to be crazy." A couple weeks ago, I was back in Boise for my mom's wedding. That's right, everybody, she finally found me a stepdaddy. Congratulations, Mom Tom. But while I was there, I called up Gary and initiated Project... Go downtown with nice cameras and film the totally dope parkour montage set to over-the-top electronic music that we always wanted to make in high school but didn't have the resources.
Sometimes go on dates. You know, try to find me a stepdaddy. There was this one guy, Steve, who was actually pretty cool. He always made a point of taking the whole family out to do stuff instead of leaving my sister and I at home. My mom didn't really like him, and she told him as much, but we still did a bunch of stuff together. He had a boat, we almost died in Mexico.
It's about time I come clean. In my first video, I made a little throwaway joke about almost dying in Mexico. At first, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but comment after comment has rolled in for years. Everyone wants to know, how did he almost die in Mexico? And putting aside that sick rhyme for a second, because you already know I got bars, the truth is, we almost died on our way to Mexico. We hadn't crossed the border yet. That change didn't seem like a big deal, but now I know better. Thanks for understanding and for respecting my family's privacy at this time. No more questions.
I can't believe he lied to us.
I don't know. Is it really fair for us to judge him from the comfort of our home when he... Oh my god!
Having an audience is an enormous responsibility. You have every right to hold me accountable for what I say.
If I say okay, will you tell us the Mexico story?
I thought you'd never ask. When I knew him, Steve was a bus driver. A church group hired the company he worked for to drive a busload of kids from Idaho down to Mexico so they could go build a church or something, I don't know. But he called my mom and said something like, "Hey, Tim's mom, I gotta take a bunch of kids down to Mexico. Do you and yours wanna also go?" And then Mom Tom, with her trademark charm, replied, sure. When the day came, Steve drove a massive bus down our tiny neighborhood street to pick us up, and maybe it was just because I was but a wee lad, but I swear it was bigger than our house. The bus drive was pretty long, and at first it was intimidating to be with a bunch of strangers, but one of the kids and I ended up getting along really well. We talked about movies, science, and even figured out how to take over the world. I'll never tell. We were gonna spend the night in Las Vegas, but when we got into town, Steve missed the exit. Then he missed the next one. My mom leaned in and asked, "Steve, why didn't you get off?" And then Steve said, "No brakes." Now that I've gotten to the good part, let's check back in on this B-plot, huh? Can you believe I just busted down a door? What's that all about?
Stop that. What happens next?
Okay, well the brakes finally started working and we spent the night at a motel. The bus company sent a mechanic and they assured us that there wouldn't be any more problems. Yep, all fixed. We dropped the church group off in San Diego and had like a week to do whatever while we waited for them to come back. So the 4 of us went up to Disneyland, and honestly, the best part was when we pulled into the Disney parking lot and the lot attendants went out of their way to clear a space right up front for our massive bus, and then like 4 people came out. The park was okay, I guess. A lot of people are super into Disneyland, including my buddy Gary from the parkour video, but I'm not gonna get distracted because this video is about almost dying, and nobody has ever died in Disneyland. Nobody has ever had a bad day in Disneyland. There can only be smiles in the land of Disney. The mouse requires your compliance. When it came time to go pick up the church group, we thought it would be fun to first drive down to the border, walk into Mexico, and be dumb tourists for a little bit. But Steve missed the turn into a parking lot, so we were driving straight toward the border crossing with no choice but to pull a big ol' U-turn. And I don't know if you know this, but buses can't do U-turns. The bus stalled in the middle of the road, perpendicular to traffic. This is the part where we almost died.
Finally.
I didn't have a ton of situational awareness because I was 7, but my mom knew what was up and threw my sister and I to the far side of the bus. A ton of cars were screaming toward us and just barely skidded to a stop without ramming into the bus. It was a really close call. My mom was pretty shaken up by the incident. But then we went into Mexico and I got my very own little marble chess set from a shop.
The horsies are my favorite.
Horses. So, you gonna fix my door?
Oh no, the video's ending. VidCon Europe happened. And I went to it with Jaden. We've known each other for a few months, but we hadn't actually met until now. I was pretty nervous about meeting in person for the first time and then immediately having to sit next to each other for 8 hours straight on our flight to Amsterdam because, I mean, let's be honest. Until then, I had no proof that she wasn't an axe murderer. Still don't, but we're friends, so she'll kill me last. Anyway, flying with a friend is awesome because airplanes are hilarious. The in-flight magazine had lots of not English bits next to pictures that couldn't ever possibly make sense. Like this one guy who is just holding a duck. What you doing with that duck, man? Are you gonna eat him? The best part about Duckman is that I used my phone to translate the caption and it said, "Test the chops of pork." Which answered, "No questions, Airplane Magazine." This guy had a hat that he seems to like. Scarlett Johansson was taking a nap for some reason, and this sweet briefcase wants you to move over, millennials. Comedy gold. I stole this. Also, I think the guy in front of me was sitting in his chair upside down. We basically spent the entire flight just tiredly laughing at everything. When we walked out of the airport, we just stood there, like, now what? We didn't even know how to get to the convention center. Luckily, a very nice and not at all shady foreign man walked up and asked, "Taxi?" "Why yes, complete stranger, we would like to put our lives in your hands." He told us to just walk toward the parking garage down the street and he'd catch up. Yeah, that's fine. At least if he murders us, we'll get a good video out of it. But it all went better than expected. He unlocked his car and then went to do something real quick before we left. The only real problem was later when he accused me of messing with his taxi meter thing. We were in the back seat. When I told him we had no idea what he was talking about, he was like, "In my 4 years of taxi driving, it's never done that." Done what? There's a first time for everything, bucko. I got a bad feeling that he was trying to scam us somehow, but since I'm so well versed in the art of doing things you're not supposed to, trademark, there was no way a taxi driver was ever gonna pull a fast one on us. He was actually a pretty nice guy, and we made it to the hotel in one piece, which, by the way, had an amazing floor-to-ceiling window. An entire wall was just a window. So that was exciting, but Jaden broke everything, so we got upgraded to a less cool room. That's fine. I mean, she only ruined my whole trip. While we were waiting for the new room, we went out to explore Amsterdam and get something to eat. I'm from a city that isn't cool enough to have a metro or anything, so we had to figure out how to use public transport. When you buy a tram pass, you're supposed to scan it when you get on and when you get off. But one time, Jaden forgot to scan it as she was getting off, and I got really worried. "Jaden, you're not following the rules!" She turned around all dramatic like, "What are they gonna do? Kick me off?" And of course, the delirious laughter didn't stop when we got off the plane. We were surrounded by signs written in Dutch that looked real silly to my dumb American eyes. Look at this. That's not a word, that's a short story. I think they had to make the building wider just to fit the name in. Sometimes we'd see a random English word thrown in for good measure, like this ad at the tram stop that said something apparently outrageous about mayonnaise, because, seriously? The best part is when a word is almost English, like the name of one of the weird restaurants Jaden found on her phone, spelled Y-A-G-O-Y, which I read, "It's Yagoy." With a name like that, we had to go. The thing we didn't know about Yagoy is that it was actually a yoga school that also sells food. Just inside was a big sign, "Show us your feet," which seemed a little forward, but who am I to argue with a laminated sign? So we took off our shoes and picked a table. The lady that runs the place came over all confused, like, people don't come here for the food, but we still got dinner and some tea that tasted like gum. 10 out of 10. When VidCon started, we went to some panels and walked around the expo hall. The craziest part of the trip to me was that about a dozen people recognized me. I mean, I think people were mostly excited to see Jaden, and I kinda cheated by tweeting what I was wearing, but that was so cool. First, thank you. Everyone who came up to us was super nice. And second, are you sure you don't have me confused with someone else? I have like 2 videos. Either way, thanks. On the second day, Jaden was the moderator of the animation panel, which was awesome, by the way. Good job, Jaden. And when it was over, I was the first to clap, so I helped too. Afterwards, Swoozie was taking selfies with fans and generally just being like the smoothest guy ever. I mean, I'm incredibly charismatic, obviously, but Adonde takes it to a whole new level. Swoozie is somehow cooler in person than in his videos. It's disgusting. So Jaden and I went over to the window where Adonde was making a small crowd feel like the most important people in the world and sat kinda next to him. I was trying to play it cool cause, can't let Swoozie outshine me too much, but also furiously taking mental notes. After a while, I was like, so, we're about to go get dinner if you wanted to come, that'd be cool, I guess. And he was like, ha, no. What, am I not cool enough to eat with? Am I not up to your standards? Probably not. But Jaden is. You're not gonna hang out with Jaden freaking animations just because I'm with her? That's understandable. Sorry, Jaden. Besides, he had another panel to do. A likely excuse. Another panelist was one of the first people I ever subscribed to, Tomska. He's pretty well known for making this. And after Swoozy headed out, it was just me, Jaden, and Tom. Now's my chance. I can use everything I learned from Swoozy just now to be so charming and funny that Tom will have no choice but to go to dinner with us and follow me on Twitter and be my best friend in the whole world. So I confidently strolled over to him and said, "So, we're about to go get dinner. If you wanted to come, that'd be cool, I guess." And he was like, "Ha ha ha, okay." It worked! And to top it all off, he followed me on Twitter so I could DM him the name of the restaurant. We are pretty much best friends now. Well, it was fun while it lasted. Tom, his friend Elliot, Jaden, and I went to this place called Wagamama, which we don't really have in the US, but it was delicious. I don't have a joke for this part, I just really liked the food. Actually, can we talk for a sec? Not everything that happens to me is funny, but now it's kind of my job to share my life and hopefully make you laugh. I wish I could tell you a hilarious story of all the crazy stuff that happened that night, and I think some YouTubers might embellish things, but the truth is, we just ate dinner and relaxed, which I needed after a day of running around VidCon. Tom and Elliot were really genuine and down to earth, and it was cool to actually get to know them a bit. We booked a few days extra with the hotel, so after VidCon, we'd have time to explore Amsterdam and take a train over to Paris, which just sounds cool, doesn't it? Yeah, no biggie, just gonna run to Paris for the day. The morning of the trip was supposed to be frantic. Wake up early, eat breakfast, ride the tram to Central Station, and get on our train as fast as possible. But I woke up and checked Twitter and went back for seconds at breakfast. Jaden, relax, we have time. It takes 22 minutes to get there, and we have half an hour. When we walked out of the hotel, we saw the tram leaving our stop, which means we'd have to wait 10 whole minutes for the next one. Wow, Jaden, you really should have hurried at breakfast. The tram we got on was excruciatingly slow, because of course it was. An old man got off without scanning his pass, and the driver stopped to make him go through all his luggage and pockets to find it. What the heck? Leave him, he's old. We got to the station with about 60 seconds to spare. We sprinted in and checked the monitors to see which platform the train was on. Before I could even focus on the screen, Jaden shouts, "This way!" and we take off running toward platform 15. As we got close to the stairs, I hear a train above start to move. We're so close! This is gonna be like one of those scenes in the movies where we throw our bags on the train and hop on just in time. This is gonna make such a good video! We climbed the stairs to the platform and saw nothing. Dang it, the video's ruined. We went back to the monitors and figured out that we needed to be on platform 15 in the international terminal, on the other side of the station. So close, yet so far away. Luckily, we were able to get on the next train out, so we just had to wait for an hour. Jaden had to go to the bathroom, and apparently in Amsterdam, you have to pay an entrance fee to pee. But she walked up to the little rotary bar thing, and instead of putting money in it like a law-abiding citizen, just kind of went under it. Don't tell her I said this, but she's a total weirdo. Unfortunately for her, the pee police emerged from the shadows and told her to leave. What? You think you can just go to the bathroom? Pfft, millennials. While we were on the train, we'd occasionally hear a stern-sounding announcement in a different language and turn to each other like, seriously? The day was off to a good start, and when we arrived in Paris, we'd have 7 hours to do as much as possible. Outside the train station, a guy came up to us and asked, "Taxi?" And we were like, this can only end well. It did not. Here's the thing, I knew he was scamming us. The driver didn't have a meter thing, so we'd have no way of knowing what the charge should have been, and the guy that brought us to the driver was wearing real expensive shoes that just screamed, "I steal money from dumb tourists." He was even saying hi to train station employees in the halls that definitely didn't know him to make it seem like he worked there. I noticed all of these things, and it still worked. That 20-minute cab ride cost 3 times what it should have. Not the end of the world, but boy, did we get taken for a ride. We walked everywhere else. It's pretty amazing what you can do in 7 hours. We went to the Eiffel Tower, but since we didn't have quite enough time to wait in line, we just touched it. And of course, signs in France also looked silly to us. I don't care what language you speak, 3 of the same letter is too many. We also stopped at a little bakery where I asked for their least American cookie, but when I said that, someone in the back laughed at me. The owner came out and said, "Sorry, I'm from Kansas." If I went to Kansas, everyone would be a total stranger, but meeting another American abroad was like, we're friends, huh? Our last night in Amsterdam, Jaden found a restaurant that we were pretty sure would let us keep our shoes on. When we showed up, the hostess said they only had 2 meals left, and we were like, sold, which was kind of the perfect ending for the trip. Neither of us had any idea what we were gonna get, but it ended up being really good.
Which is a dumb metaphor. What's going on, dudes? This is your boy, Timtom. This is definitely Timtom. I would never be lazy enough to get some other shirtless person to do my end card. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out...
I have a really distinct memory of the first time I saw Kiki's Delivery Service, which is a great movie, and since you like my channel, obviously you have great taste and I'm sure that you'll love it, but that's beside the point. It was a lazy Sunday afternoon. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and if you listened closely, you could hear the distant sound of someone wasting their time mowing their lawn. I should have been completely relaxed and enjoying life, but there was just one problem. I had an essay due Monday. The weekend was drawing to a close and my stress level was rising, so I did what any reasonable person would do in a situation like that. I grabbed my backpack and moved it off the couch so I could sit down and watch TV. Instead of confronting the thing that was stressing me out, I distracted myself with whatever was playing. As I watched the movie, I got progressively more stressed out. I'm burning daylight, why don't I just go get it done? I became unbearably uncomfortable, with a lump in my throat and tension in every muscle. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't relax. The longer I waited, the more I was paralyzed by stress, and the more I needed to focus on something else to try and stop myself from freaking out. From the outside, I was just watching a movie, intently. Now this was a long time ago, so I don't actually remember if I got that essay done on time, but knowing me, probably not. I was a chronic procrastinator in school. Teachers always told me that I needed to manage my time better, schedule specific times to do things, set deadlines. I tried. I really tried. But none of that advice ever helped, and all through high school, I always ended up doing things last minute. So not only was I super stressed out all the time, I started to feel pretty crappy about myself. Like, dang, why can't I just get it together? After a while, you just feel like a failure. And I'm not the only one. There are so many videos about procrastination, and some of them even try to give advice. The problem is, so much of that advice is completely worthless. It usually boils down to what my teachers told me. You're just not managing your time effectively. What if I told you that procrastination wasn't about managing time at all? Procrastination is about managing emotions. Hold on. Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. I just blew my mind. Okay, I know that might sound a little wild at first, but I promise it's true. When I think back to every time that I've procrastinated, it's been something pretty important. And the funny thing is, the more important it is, the more I care about doing a good job, and the more likely I've been to put it off. What's really happening is that the more important something is, the more afraid I am of messing it up, and you can't mess something up if you're not doing it. So the more I wait, the less time I have to work, which means I'm even less likely to do a good job. Do you see? Do you see the vicious cycle? It's all there. But it's not always a fear of failure. Sometimes it's just a lack of clarity. When you've got a big project to do, the first step isn't always obvious, so there's lots of uncertainty looming over you. In that case, it's really a fear of the unknown that's stopping you. In either case, there's a strong emotion that's demanding to be dealt with, and the way I think a lot of people deal with it is to distract themselves. It's so much easier to just do something comfortable, like watch Kiki's Delivery Service. Another one of my favorite strategies is something I like to call lie to myself. Which is a pretty neat trick. Watch this. Let's say that it's Friday after school. I have a big project due on Monday, but I just worked hard all day and I don't really have the energy to work on it right now. I'll get started tomorrow. See what I did there? I lied to myself. I was kind of stressed about the project and naturally I needed to manage that emotion, so I made something resembling a plan. That made me feel like I was in control and it reduced my stress. Mission accomplished. But like, I don't have a history of making effective plans for the future, and the next morning my friend is gonna call me and we're gonna go climb on some rooftops downtown. I should know by now that my plans will not survive a call from Gary. A better plan would have accounted for that. So to recap, most people think that procrastination is about managing time when it's actually about managing your emotions. This leads to putting effort into fixing the wrong things and getting nowhere. Meanwhile, they manage their emotions with ineffective strategies like distraction. Things don't improve and the cycle repeats itself. Now that we know what the real problem is, let's talk about how to deal with it. Managing your emotions effectively is something that probably takes a lifetime to master, so don't beat yourself up when you fail. It's still gonna happen, and that's okay. I think the first step to stopping procrastination is just to recognize when you're distracting yourself, which is surprisingly hard because the whole point of distracting yourself is to stop thinking about the thing that you're supposed to be thinking about. But every now and again, while you're watching a video or playing a game, you might have a moment of realization. Wow, I should really get to work. In that moment, you have two options. Either you can say, maybe just one more video, or you can close the tab and actually get to work. If you choose to continue to distract yourself, who knows how long it'll be until you have another chance to break free. Those moments are incredibly important, and if you want to stop procrastinating, that's when it needs to happen. We all know how often one more video has turned into 5 and then 10 more, so take it from me. Don't lie to yourself. There's no such thing as just one more. And if you can do that, you're halfway there. Once you've stopped distracting yourself, you might notice that you're pretty anxious about whatever it is you need to do. And if you're anything like me, you'll reflexively
reach for some other distraction, but you don't need to. Just take a moment and breathe. Anxiety isn't fun, but distracting yourself just delays it. To make it go away, you need to do something to gain control. Take a moment to think about what specifically needs to be done and break it down into small pieces. If you can put together a really clear plan of action, some of that anxiety might start to fade. You might still be intimidated by the idea of getting started, so maybe step 1 is just to...
I knew the day would come eventually, but it always seemed so far away, you know? Imaginary, almost. We had so much time, it felt like the fun would never end. Until it did. What I wouldn't give for just one more day. But I suppose everyone ends up here, sooner or later. I was so nervous I was shaking. It was my turn to present in front of the class.
If this situation sounds familiar, then ladies and gentlemen, lend me your ear. My little narration might sound insincere, but this may be adrenaline, which is nothing to fear. If you don't like speaking to more than one or two, then boy howdy have I got a deal for you. When the teacher decides it's your turn to stand, you're holding your poster in your sweaty little hand. It's hard walking up to the front of the room, let alone talking with discernible boom. But remember my words when you reach into your pocket to find that your notes are spaghetti, and the teacher is made of spaghetti, and the poster was spaghetti the whole time.
Who cares about your presentation? Everything is spaghetti. Run!
I love giving presentations. Public speaking is one of the most common fears, so you may find that shocking. And if you are like most people, you have only one question on your mind. Now that I have a violent stranglehold on your attention, I can tell you about the best presentation that I have ever given and let you in on my secret for how to be as good at them as me.
One time in English class, we had to give a presentation about our family traditions and trace them back to the countries they started in. Like how some parents hide a pickle-shaped ornament on their Christmas tree and give an extra present to the first kid who finds it on Christmas morning. That tradition supposedly originated in Germany, but I'm not totally sure because I'm not German, probably. My mom didn't know what countries our ancestors were from, so instead of calling up distant relatives and doing, research, I went to my teacher and was basically like, I don't have a dad, which probably made him super uncomfortable, so he decided not to make me do that part of the assignment. For those of you keeping track at home, my assignment had just become talk about your family, which doesn't require any research. Score! So for like 2 weeks, the whole class would spend English period in the library doing research and making poster boards for their presentations. Except for me. I played computer games, and it seemed like the fun would never end. Until it did. Uh-oh, back to the scary part. Okay, I don't have anything done yet, and presentations start today. What did I even do all week? We won't get through everyone in one day, right? If I don't get called on, that gives me an extra day to get ready. But I'll work through lunch so I'm not totally empty-handed, just in case. Yeah, that's not happening. Maybe if I don't move, he'll forget I exist. Whew, I can't believe that worked. I can do my math homework during Spanish tomorrow, so the presentation is the only thing I have to worry about tonight. Oh, I'm way too stressed to get anything done right now. I just need to relax for a second. Why can't I think of what to write? I thought this was gonna be really easy, but I've got nothing. Well, let's just hope I don't get called tomorrow. I've got it. I wake up in the night with ideas all the time. Usually it's dumb ideas for videos, but I'm too tired to know how dumb they really are, so the next morning I find things like, guy casually holding knife written in my notes. Which, by the way, is actually something I wrote down recently. Does he just stand there with a knife? Be careful, sir! But this was one of those lucky few times that what I wrote down was actually good. I didn't focus too much on traditions exactly, just a lot of the things I liked about my family. Like how lots of people might make banana nut bread, but since we weren't huge fans of walnuts, we called ours banana nutless bread. I wasn't totally sure what to put on my poster, so I downloaded random images of things vaguely related to the stories I was telling, like a banana. And a crab. In the morning, I printed off the pictures and frantically glued everything down. Things had turned around completely. I was freaking out just as much, but now it was like a good freak out. Now that I was prepared, I was actually kind of excited, and during English, I volunteered to go first. Everything was fresh in my mind, so I thought I might as well get it out of the way, and maybe I could put this good freak out to use. I walked to the front of the room, and everyone laughed at how random my poster was. It's always nerve-wracking to give a speech, but Banana Nutless got a genuine laugh, so that helped. Then I talked about how my grandma had a houseboat, and some of my earliest memories were going out on the water to set crab traps. We'd cook the crab right there on the boat and throw the shells back into the water as we ate them, which sounds super cool until I tell you Toddler Tim's favorite part of the houseboat. Playing McDonald's. That's a game where you run around the outside of the boat to the kitchen window and knock frantically until your grandma opens up. Then you place your order and run as fast as you can to the window on the other side of the boat to pick up your imaginary food. Rinse and repeat. You'll know you've won when the first window stops opening. I also talked about my other grandma, Emma. At first, she was only my babysitter, but she babysat me from day one, and I just grew up calling her grandma. I have so many fond memories of her, and when I'm ready, I'm gonna make a video just for her. But in the meantime, I'll tell you one of the stories that I shared with my class. Grandma Emma's house was incredibly clean, but you know how some people's houses feel like a museum? Like, they're really clean, but also uncomfortable, and it's like you're not supposed to touch anything. Her house was different. I don't know if it was the lemony fresh smell or her big old grandma hugs, but when you walked in, you were home. I told the class that if there's one thing my grandma taught me, it's that you don't have to be blood relatives to be family. Traditions and the countries they might have come from don't matter. In the end, the only thing that matters are the memories we have of the ones we love. Or something like that. Maybe the universe is a hologram and nothing matters. The point is, the class freaking loved my speech. I'd like to think it was because I shared something really personal, but it was probably because I ended by essentially saying that this whole assignment was worthless, and everyone was like, yeah, stick it to the man! Whatever the reason, I got an honest-to-goodness standing ovation. Now, I don't blame those of you in the comments with your little jazz hands saying that there's no way I got a standing ovation at school, but I don't care what you think because I know the truth and that's all that matters. Unless we're holograms. Anyway, I love giving presentations. I think I had to totally crush it at least once to realize how fun they can be, but now I love performing. I still get nervous, but here's my secret to dealing with it. I have a theory. A regular theory. Giving a speech is an intense experience, but I think anxiety and excitement are kind of two sides on the same intensity coin, if that makes sense. When you're about to perform, you get a hit of adrenaline, and most people feel that as anxiety. But I've found that most of the time, I can decide to feel that intensity as excitement instead. Especially if I've prepared and know exactly what I'm supposed to say. It doesn't work every time, but it's worth a shot.
So the next time you give a presentation, try your best not to feel hesitation. Remember to turn your fear into fuel. Classmates will stand and shout that you rule. And after you'll say, oh, no way, it is possible. I never should have left that comment on Tim's video.
Once every semester in high school, we would have a mandatory spirit assembly. I've been told that it was about supporting our sports teams or something, but based on the title, I'm not entirely convinced that it wasn't about ghosts. Anyway, my friends and I would usually get our parents to write us notes so we could leave after lunch instead of having to sit in those uncomfortable bleachers for 2 hours. But one time, I forgot to get my note. I was resigned to my spooky fate until 5th period, when I found my golden ticket. Someone had left a printed staff-only email in plain sight. It listed who was supposed to guard which door after final attendance was taken to be sure that students couldn't skip the assembly. Armed with this email and a map of the school, I began to hatch my escape plan. I crossed off every exit in the list and found that one was to be left unattended. For some reason, the assembly was in the gym, so the auditorium and its backstage door leading outside would be unsupervised, which would have been perfect if the entrance to the auditorium wasn't locked from the inside. Luckily, I just happened to have some electrical tape. When the lunch bell rang, I ran to my locker and hit my first snag. Kyle noticed me taking things out of my locker instead of putting them away and immediately knew.
Timtom, how are you getting out of this?
With no time to explain, I got all Terminator-y on him and was like, "Come with me if you want to live." So Kyle grabbed his bag and followed me to the auditorium's side door, in plain view of an exit that would soon be guarded. I knew that the side door could be unlocked if you pulled up on the handle real hard, but for the sake of the story, pretend that I picked the lock, because that's way cooler.
What are we even doing?
Shut up, Kyle, I have a plan. We made our way to the back of the auditorium and stashed our bags. Then, I covertly disabled the entrance's locking mechanism. Doesn't that sound cool? I put tape on the latches. After lunch, everyone headed to take attendance before the assembly. It was then that panic set in. The entrance to the auditorium may be unlocked, but it's raised above the cafeteria floor. Walking up those steps would be suspicious. We needed a credibility prop. For those of you not versed in the art of doing things you're not supposed to, a credibility prop is something that makes it look like you belong where you don't. When I reached my class, I saw it. A 50-foot Ethernet cable coiled on a table by the door. Perfect. I was the first out of the room, and when I saw Kyle, I threw him one end of the cable and let it all unfurl. Now if a teacher saw us walking up the steps, it would look like we were working, I guess? Look, it made sense at the time, okay?
It didn't.
Shut up, Kyle. We grabbed our bags and headed backstage. Kyle opened the door, blinding me with sunlight and freedom before retreating immediately. Someone who had made a break for it was getting hauled back inside by a teacher, and she had almost seen us. Dang it, Kyle, do not blow this operation. I opened the door more cautiously this time. The coast was clear and we bolted in opposite directions. Rob, my getaway driver who remembered his note, was waiting in his car, engine running. It was hard to believe. After what must have been whole minutes of planning, we were finally free. My 5th period teacher actually overheard me discussing my plan and was like, Timtom, why don't you just go to the assembly? And I remember really dramatically turning around and saying something like, it's not about the assembly, it's about the plan. And he was like, all right, and went back to playing solitaire. One time, I skipped school by hiding in someone's backyard when the bus pulled up to the stop, and then I walked home after my mom left for work and used her email to let the school know that I was sick, and I deleted their reply. Which is horrible, but it was the only time I've ever impersonated someone, and I want to pretend that makes it better. I never told her that though.
My first car was a boat. Okay, not like an actual boat, just one of those huge Oldsmobiles from the 80s that might as well have been straight from an episode of SpongeBob. I bought it for practically nothing from my neighbor Bill, who wanted to see it go to a good home. It used to be his mom's car, and she basically only ever drove to the grocery store, so it was in great condition, and it meant a lot to him. He's a really nice guy. Actually, embarrassing moment side tangent. One day after school, I pulled into my garage and took a couple minutes to look at something on my phone before I got out of the car. Bill came over to talk to me about something, but I didn't see him, and I ended up looking at my phone for a long time. But he had already walked into the garage to talk to me, and I don't think he expected me to just sit there for so long. Anyway, I eventually looked up to open the door, locked eyes with him, and screamed like a little girl. Okay, so my car was in good condition, but it was made in 1984. It could have kids by now. They'd probably only be Power Wheels, but still. Most kids at my school had way nicer cars. I mean, this was a public school, so it's not like they had Lambos, but they might as well have. It was a running joke with my friends that my car didn't have horsepower, it had hamster power. Some cars have enough horses that if you floor it, you'll get thrown back so hard your hair changes color. But when I floored it, my hair stayed the same. The weird thing is, when you put it into park, it kind of lurched forward like it was ready to go. Where was that enthusiasm 10 minutes ago? I don't really care about cars though, so I was never embarrassed or anything. I loved that car, and how could I not? It was my first. When I got it, our garage had lots of boxes and stuff, so we kept my car in the driveway for the whole neighborhood to see. That's how not embarrassed I was. One night, I was sitting in my room and I got the sudden urge to do something, anything. I just needed to get out of the house. My mom was already asleep, but that just meant an opportunity to practice the art of doing things you're not supposed to, trademark. I texted my friend Ryan to see if he wanted to be my partner in crime for the night. While I wait for him to text back, did you know that my brother's name is Ryan too? Crazy! Also, he and his kids watch my videos, but, and I've got the evidence right here, one of them watches Logan Paul. Sorry, Connor, looks like I can only shout out Jace. Oh, I didn't send it. So my friend texted me back and was totally down to hang out. I climbed out of my window and snuck around the house to my car. But here's the problem. If I shut the car door or start the engine in the driveway, the sound will wake everybody up. To get away with this, I needed to get the car down the street as quietly as possible. I picked him up and parked at the library between the river and FedEx on Capitol Boulevard in downtown Boise, Idaho. You know the one. We walked around for a bit, and you won't believe who we ran into. Nobody. Cities are surprisingly boring at night, and it was kind of cold, so we went back to the car. I turned right onto Capitol from the library parking lot when suddenly a cop car flew across the bridge and blocked me. How did he know I was sneaking out? Okay, I put the car into park.
Put your hands in the air.
I know it was only one cop, but I might as well have had 5 stars in GTA with a helicopter and everything. The cop came over to my window and asked if I knew why he pulled us over. I actually had no idea, so he helped me out with a little pop quiz. Which way does Capitol go? Capitol Boulevard is a one-way. Capitol Boulevard is a one-way. While the cop was on the phone tattling to my mom, Ryan goes, "Can I put my hands down yet? Do you want to die?" The cop was actually pretty nice, and he let us leave with just a warning. That's when we decided to go on the run. We escaped into the night, never to be seen again. Just kidding. Ryan actually didn't get into trouble because the cop didn't call his mom. So when we got back to my street, I made him get out and walk the 1.5 miles back to his place. It seemed fair. Hello, Timothy. Oh, hey, Mom. What were you doing out so late, Timothy? You know. You're in big trouble, Timothy. Honestly, I'm not sure where this is going. I just wanted to use that voice. My mom actually wasn't too mad. But the next day when I got home from school, the garage was completely cleaned out. It finally had enough room for my car, which meant no more late night adventures. And remember how I thought I didn't send that text to Ryan about sneaking out? I actually did send it. To my brother Ryan. And of course, he told my mom, which means I would have gotten caught no matter what. The universe is a vast and cruel mistress. Fast forward a couple years, and I got myself a bona fide J.O.B. I don't know why I said it like that, but I was moving to Montana, which might explain it. My mom was worried about her little baby boy living on his own for the first time, so she bought me all of the things. Pots, pans, towels, the whole 9. I wanted to wait until I got there to buy stuff as I needed it, but she didn't listen, so I blame her for what happened next. Also, thanks for the stuff, Mom. We loaded up my precious Oldsmobile with all of my new, heavy things and ventured north. Oh hey, pro tip, don't move in the winter. We hit a terrible blizzard and the old mobile just couldn't handle it. It was so overworked from pushing through the snow and carrying all that heavy stuff that the engine seized up entirely and we had to junk the whole... There are so many things to enjoy about the holiday season. Fun decorations, hot chocolate, rampant consumerism, but sometimes the most enjoyable things are the smallest things. And sometimes those small things are dangerously enjoyable. So much fun that somehow you end up spending Christmas in the hospital. So this happened when I was about 7 years old. And the thing you need to know about me is that I love solving puzzles. Not necessarily jigsaw puzzles in particular, but any kind of puzzle like Rubik's Cube, Sudoku, anything where there's an unknown solution, but everything you need to find it is already in your head. There's something absolutely magical about that to me. So every December, when a small trickle of presents from family and friends would start appearing under our Christmas tree, I saw them as puzzles begging to be solved. It was my annual grand challenge to figure out what could possibly be in those boxes before the 25th. Now, of course I could cheat. I could peel the wrapping paper back just enough to get a peek at the box, and I won't lie, I may have done that a few times, but not only is that a great way to get into trouble, Timothy, it's also much less satisfying than figuring it out on your own. Shaking the boxes, on the other hand, anything you can observe without tearing the paper is perfectly fair game in my book. Feeling how heavy a box is and how the weight distributes inside is pretty often just enough to solve the puzzle. Maybe you can feel, through the paper, that one side of the box is flimsy plastic. That could be the window that displays a remote control car. Maybe turning it over causes an avalanche of tiny plastic pieces within. That can only be Legos. The problem is that my mom would usually hide anything too obvious until the night before Christmas, which meant that usually the only puzzles left for me to solve were the hardest ones. And I know what you're thinking. Why don't I just... snoop? Mom's closet, crawl space, back of the fridge, no dice. Apparently, one year my brother used the old credit card trick to open up my mom's locked closet to find all the gifts she had hidden away. Ever since then, my mom would hide presents at her office. I never had a chance. For my first few Christmases, I never successfully guessed what my presents were. Until one year, when a very peculiar present showed up, and for some reason my mom decided to just put it under the tree instead of taking it to her office. It didn't come in a box, it was wide and flat, and with what I can only describe as a small cylinder sticking up from the middle, which made the wrapping paper drape down toward the edges, like a really short tent. Fascinating. I puzzled for days, trying my hardest to figure out what could possibly take this strange shape. I puzzled and puzzled till my puzzler was sore, until finally, for the first time in my 7 years, I successfully guessed what a present was. The minute it clicked, I just knew I had to be right. There's nothing else it could be. I was straight up shaking in excitement, frothing at the mouth. I solved it. I had a few weeks to wait before I could find out if I was right or not, but my excitement didn't really die down. I don't know if you've ever experienced the rush of solving a puzzle, but let me tell you, it doesn't get much better than that. One morning when I was taking a bath before school, I noticed a little red spot on my leg. It was kind of puffy, I don't know, but it didn't look good. So I asked my mom and she said I must have gotten bit by a spider in my sleep, which Mom, there are spiders in my bed?
The next day, the red puffy spot had gotten bigger, and it was like, oh, that's probably not good. And the next day, there were a bunch more red puffy spots all over, everywhere. And I was like, oh, that's really not good. I can't remember exactly how long it took to realize that this wasn't about to stop on its own, but on Christmas Eve, we went to the hospital. Apparently, I was so excited that I broke out in hives. My fragile little body just couldn't handle it, and if Benadryl wasn't a thing, it would have spread to my trachea and murdered me. All of that for the dumbest present imaginable. I just want to reiterate, I wasn't excited for the present. I was just excited that I figured it out, okay? It was one of those coin collector maps with a little slot for a quarter from each state and a stack of quarters. And the worst part is that when my mom saw it, she goes, I guess you really like coin collecting, huh? Boy, it feels good to get another video done. You might have noticed that I've been posting
Hey, Tim.
Oh, hey, Emily, what's up?
Have you heard about this great new app called Quid?
Yeah, didn't they just sponsor one of your videos?
They did. Quid is a brand new app that lets you collect stickers, gifts, cards, and more.
Wait, are you doing a sponsorship in my video?
Don't worry about it.
You can't do that.
But the app is free, and it has the biggest catalog of stickers anywhere. You can collect them from all of your favorite shows. Everything from Rick and Morty to My Little Pony.
Oh, well, I do like My Little Pony.
That's weird. You can also text stickers to all of your friends and family by enabling the Quid iMessage app.
Oh, I get it. That's kind of cool.
It also has Funko Pop figures and other 3D collectibles that you can trade to complete your collection. They even have stickers of you.
Wait, me? I gotta see this. Say, Emily, where do I go to download the great new app called Quid?
Now you're getting it. Click the link in the description. I already made you an account, so all of your viewers can add you.
Oh, Emily, how thoughtful and mildly intrusive of you.
Don't mention it.
Okay, while you're here, you want to hear a story about the time I stole from my dentist?
Sure.
So I think I was in like the second grade. And you know, you like go into the dentist every 6 months to get teeth cleaning and stuff, or you're
Yeah, I
supposed
hated
to.
it.
When we were done doing the whole cleaning thing and my mouth tastes like fluoride or whatever, it'd come out as they're like walking you to the front. There's this treasure chest filled with toys. Usually on your way out of the dentist, like the dental hygienist is walking you back up to the front, you pass a little treasure chest and she's like, okay, pick out the toy that you want. She opens it up for you and it's like, oh, like look at all of my options. Which one could I choose, right? And of course, when you're in the second grade, those dollar store toys that you're getting for free, that's like a really important decision. So one time I was taking forever to decide. I'm like, oh, do I want this one or do I want this one? I don't know. So I was left alone with the chest of toys. And I've got this goodie bag, and I'm having a hard time deciding which I want. And look, I'm really young. I feel like you're judging me right now.
No. You were like, what, 8?
Not even, like 7? Okay, but the point is that I, like, loaded up. I filled that bag with, like, bunches of toys.
You were one of those kids.
No, I wasn't.
No, you were one of those kids on Halloween where if there's a bowl outside of the house, that
I wasn't,
said,
though.
Please take one. You
is
shove
like
the whole bowl in your bag.
Unfair. I never did that. I did the Halloween thing once, okay? But, like, the point is that this was, like, uncharacteristic. I was generally, like, well-behaved, but then every now and then...
You were overcome with your greed.
Yeah, every now and then greed got the best of me, and I was like... Okay, but I'm gonna take all of the toys. So I'm standing there with like this goodie bag just filled with toys. There's probably like a whole 6 or 7 in there, I know. And it didn't cross my mind that I should just like keep them in my bag until I got home. I know that I'm weak, and the minute I get in that car, I'm dumping this bag out and I'm gonna play with all of these toys. So instead of like controlling myself and waiting, I thought like, okay, what can I tell them?
You could not really.
I couldn't, it wasn't even an option in my mind. It's like, I'm gonna get in the car and I'm gonna play with these toys. So we get in the car and I immediately dump out the bag, because of course I did. And like, there's just this treasure trove of every kind of toy you can imagine from the dollar store. And I'm like, oh yes.
Your sins were displayed before you.
Yeah. Of course my mom turns around and she's like, where did you get those? And then I'm like, I opened my toothpaste box and like I knew how stupid it sounded coming out of my mouth. I mean, maybe, I don't know. It starts coming out and I'm like, this is dumb, and I tried to like turn it into a joke. Like, nah, clearly that wasn't no one would come up with a lie that dumb.
Did you even make it out of the parking lot before you dumped these toys out?
No, the car hadn't even started yet.
Oh my God!
And she was like, return them. And I'm like, no.
Doing your little walk of shame back to the dentist
Yeah, exactly.
office.
So I was like shaking, like loading it back up into the bag, and I walked back across the parking lot. I actually don't think that I said anything, right? So I walked back in just like quietly with like a little tear in my eye and like dumped the bag out onto the counter and like all of the toys. And they were like, I don't think that they understood exactly what was happening at first. They just, this little second grader comes back in and dumps out these toys onto the counter, and they're like, "Oh, hey Tim, what's going on?" And I just like, like ran out of there, like didn't say anything. And it was super embarrassing. I was like, "Mom, how could you do that to me?" And she's like, "You stole, dude. Like, that's what you get. You have to fess up." So the next time we went to the dentist, I'm like thoroughly embarrassed, right? Because I'm like, of course, that's all I can think about is just how they're all like just judging me deeply. And okay, so we're walking out of the office and we pass a little chest, and the lady asks if I want a toy. And like, I didn't think that I deserved one. So I was just quietly like, "Oh, no, thank you." Right?
I'm a changed man.
I'm a changed man. Right? So she was like, "Oh, all right." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's, I've learned my lesson." From then on, every time I went to the dentist, I never got a toy again. And I mean, if I hadn't tried to steal those handful of toys, just think about how many slappy hands I could have gotten in the years afterward if I had like,
Hey, kids.
"Yeah,
Do you want to help raise money for charity?
yeah."
Haha, do you have any money? Of course not. But thanks to the sponsor of this intro, you don't need any. When you install Tab for a Cause, every time you open a new browser tab, you help raise money for a charity of your choice. Click the link in the description to install the free browser plugin that's so far raised almost $1 million for charity. Install it on your computer. Install it on your dog's computer. Install it everywhere. Take over the world. For charity.
Ah, technology, where would we be without ye? I don't think enough people appreciate just how incredible technology has become in the last few decades, so I'm gonna do it for you. For most of humanity, each generation has had essentially the same lifestyle as their parents. After we invented the wheel, humans did like nothing for thousands of years. Come on, past humanity, get it together. But now, we're in an age where our lives are significantly different from what they were even a decade ago. Modern technology changed the way we learn, play, socialize, work, travel, you name it. In the blink of an eye, every aspect of life has been radically altered, which as far as I know has never happened before. I didn't get a phone until I was 14, and even then I could only make calls, so it was, useless. I asked my mom if I could get texting because that's how all my friends talked to each other, but you can imagine how it sounds through a parent's ears when their kid says, "Everyone else has it." Yeah, okay. Fast forward a year, and my mom, sister, and I were visiting some family. Sitting at a restaurant, all of the kids were texting each other except me. My mom saw them all laughing and sending secret messages to each other, and she realized that texting had, in fact, become a pretty important part of teenagers' social lives, and she felt awful that I was getting left out. After the trip, she was adamant about getting me a new phone that I could text with ASAP. It was actually really sweet. Would have been nice if she had, listened the first time, but it's whatever. Of course, the biggest example of a technology that's dramatically changed daily life is the internet. Think about it. You can find the answer to practically any question instantly. Are you kidding me? That's an absolute god-tier superpower. How do I change my oil? Bam, video walkthrough. What's the answer to this math problem? Boom, Wolfram Alpha. How do I make shortbread? Kerblamo, a delicious recipe with a wholly unnecessary personal story. The internet is the greatest tool humanity has ever devised, and even it's radically changed during my lifetime. When I was in elementary school, we got dial-up internet, which is where your computer uses the house phone to call a different computer and swap JPEGs with bleeps and bloops. It was incredibly slow, and it was magical. I remember waiting for over an hour for a flash animation to load, and it was the funniest thing I had ever seen. The first YouTube video I ever watched was OKGo's treadmill video, and since it took so long to buffer, I wound up watching it over and over while it loaded, each time getting just a few more seconds. Since the internet went over the phone line, you could break it by picking up the phone and pressing a bunch of buttons, or by using a paperclip to short the second and third contacts in the wall jack. So, when you get into a fight with your sister and she forces you off the family computer that you're supposed to share, you can go to your room and get sweet revenge by kicking her offline, and when she bursts in accusing you of tampering with the phone, you can reply with an innocent, "But how? I don't have a phone in my room," and she'll storm off, defeated but still suspicious, except you're not the bad guy because you didn't get to use the internet all day yesterday, so it was definitely your turn and she deserved it.
These days, buffering is a thing of the past for most people, but more importantly, now I can watch any movie whenever I want. Any movie! When I was a young baby child, if I wanted to see a movie, I had to beg my mom to take me to Blockbuster and pray they had it in stock. Getting a hold of a specific movie was an ordeal, and if you decided that you weren't really feeling it, too bad! We paid for that bad boy, so we will be watching it until the end of the credits, and we will be kind, and we will rewind, because we are law-abiding citizens, and I will be damned if Blockbuster is gonna charge me a fee to press a button and wait! R.I.P. Blockbuster, you will be missed. I feel like an old man telling stories about back in my day, but that's kind of the point. This wasn't that long ago, and things have already advanced so much. The internet is the foundation that almost every other recent life-changing technology has been built on. It seems like it can do anything. Perhaps it even has an answer to the most important question of all. How do I find love? Well, there's always Tinder. I remember when I first got a smartphone, and suddenly I had access to the internet everywhere. Being able to use your location to get context-specific information like directions and... Okay, it's mostly directions, but that's super useful. I know all of this has been around for a while and it's become boring to most people, but guys, how are we not all constantly freaking out about this? Smartphones especially can just do so much. I could write, shoot, and edit an entire film on this little thing in my pocket. You probably wouldn't want to, but you could. A modern smartphone is basically that watch from Spy Kids that literally does everything except tell time, except my phone also has a clock. Take that, Danny Trejo! It used to be that getting a job required going door to door and giving your resume to business after business until eventually you got a call for an interview. Or so I've been told, because today every job application is online. But for some reason, everyone over the age of, 40 doesn't seem to understand that's not how the world works anymore. If you walk into a business, resume in hand, asking for an application, you'll be given nothing but a confused look by the guy behind the counter as he eventually realizes that your mom must be waiting for you outside. And of course you already know this, but applications are on their website, he'll tell you. Information that you'll take back to the silver Hyundai Elantra idling in the parking lot, this time unable to be ignored. And because I know she's watching, don't worry, Mom Tom, literally everyone my age had that exact experience. I love you. Anyway, I know things are kind of blah right now, but technology is amazing, and especially right now, I'm just like, I love the internet! That's all. Also, my mom is a single parent, and when I was growing up, she'd sometimes go on dates. You know, try to find me a stepdaddy. There was this one guy, Steve, who was actually pretty cool. He always made a point of taking the whole family out to do stuff instead of leaving my sister and I at home. My mom didn't really like him, and she told him as much, but we still did a bunch of stuff together. He had a boat, we almost died in Mexico, it was great. As you can imagine, Steve and I didn't have much in common, so we pretty much just quoted Seinfeld to each other all the time. I was a weird kid. There's this one episode where every time someone says something about being gay, everyone else goes, "Not that there's anything wrong with that." So whenever one of us would say something even remotely related to being gay, Steve and I would go, "Not that there's anything wrong with that." Kind of like a that's what she said joke. After a while, Steve stopped hanging out with us because, well, he wanted to buy the cow, but he wasn't even getting the milk for free, if you know what I mean. And life went on. But a few years later, Steve called up my mom and was like, "Hey, Tim's mom, let's hang out." And the three of us went to dinner. But Steve had changed. When the opportunity arose, I said, "Not that there's anything wrong with that, just like old times." And Steve said, "Nothing." Maybe he didn't hear me. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Steve? And he looked at me like, well, wait, what's wrong with being gay? And he told me that he didn't want anything to do with homosexuals, and if his own son was gay, he would never talk to him again, which is just like... Now, I'm not gay, but gosh darn it, people should be allowed to like whoever they want to, and it's not cool to push your beliefs onto others. So I spent the rest of the evening pushing my beliefs onto Steve. We argued the entire drive home, and by the time we went inside, my mom was pretty done with this whole thing. So she initiated Project... convinced Steve that she's a lesbian so that he and I would stop arguing and he would go home and she and I could eat ice cream and get to bed at a reasonable time because we needed to get up early the next morning. .com. So she's all, "What if I'm gay?" And Steve gets all dismissive, like, "You're not though." And my mom's like, "Why do you think Tim's been arguing all night?" Which is, good point, Mom. And Steve gets all worried and looks at me like, "Is she?" Now, I was totally on board with projecticecream.com, but I knew my acting skills weren't quite up to the challenge, so I just kind of avoided the question and looked down. In his mind, I was looking down out of shame or something, but really, I was just trying to keep from laughing. So Steve is entirely convinced that my mom bats for the other...
There it is, the Anaheim Convention Center. And good old Catella Avenue, how could I ever forget it? And there I am, with that dumb round face and that stupid green shirt. But no matter, VidCon was on its way. Lovely, glorious, beautiful VidCon, around which the entire YouTuber year revolved. VidCon holds a really special place in my heart. If you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I used to work there, behind the scenes all year round like an elf in Santa's workshop, building something unforgettable for everyone to enjoy. Some people spend their whole year waiting for their favorite holiday, Christmas, Halloween, Arbor Day, and I'm no different, but my holiday is VidCon, and since it's that time of year again, I thought I might take you back, behind the scenes, to one of my most memorable memories of working at VidCon all those years ago. But first, in the spirit of Christmas, we're gonna need a healthy dose of capitalism. Over the last 3 years that I've been a full-time YouTuber, I've raised my standards a lot. I want to make the best videos for you, so I've hired some friends to help me animate. But as we all know, exposure doesn't put food on the table, and the only way I can afford to pay them for their hard work is to partner with sponsors every now and then. Which is why I'm excited to say this video is sponsored by Honey, the free browser extension that automatically finds the best promo codes whenever you shop online, which means you always get the best deals on over 20,000 sites like Amazon, eBay, Best Buy, Walmart, and more. I need to buy some new running shoes, right? And thanks to Honey, I could save $18 on this pair. If you're not using Honey when you shop online, you're basically throwing money away. It only takes 2 clicks to install. Just go to my link and bing, bang, boom, you've joined 10 million other members in saving online. Please read verbatim. Listen, there's literally no reason not to use Honey for everything you buy online. It's free to use and installs in just 2 clicks. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/Timtom. That's joinhoney.com/Timtom. I get a lot of emails from companies that want to sponsor the channel, but there's not many that I'd feel good about promoting. Honey, on the other hand, is something that actually provides value and doesn't make their money by like selling your data, so I feel comfortable promoting them. Without their sponsorship, I wouldn't be able to make as many videos, so if you want to support the channel, support them, and click the link in the description to try Honey today.
Okay, back to the story. I don't think people realize how much work goes into properly running an event the size of VidCon. Tana, you dingus. Yeah, I said it. In fact, a lot of people are surprised to find out that a team works all year to get ready for that single weekend. There's contract negotiations with hotels. You gotta work with security companies and the fire department to make safety plans. There's signs all through the convention center that need to be designed, not to mention the guide, which is basically an entire magazine that needs to be written, laid out, and printed. And you can't forget about all the booth vendors and sponsors who have all sorts of crazy requirements. You gotta hire companies to make the website and app so that attendees can get all the info they'll need to attend. There's so much coordination between so many people and companies that it's a wonder VidCon happens at all. Not many people know this, but one year, many moons ago, it almost didn't. When I worked there, every year, a couple months before VidCon, the core team flew from VidCon headquarters in Montana down to Anaheim, California. The point of this site visit was to meet with all of the people we'd be working with during the event, get to know each other ahead of time, and talk about where signs and stages and activities will go. It's way easier to know if you have enough room for a big old ball pit if you're actually standing there instead of just looking at a map. At my first site visit, after days of back-to-back meetings, our boss decided to treat the team to a super fancy dinner at a super nice steakhouse. The restaurant was incredible. We had a room all to ourselves, and they even custom printed menus for us. It was probably the fanciest meal I've ever eaten. That VidCon was gonna be the best yet, and my coworkers and I were excited to relax and celebrate our hard work. I can't tell you how great it felt to finally get to kick back for a moment. The whole team was riding high. But when we were done with dinner, we went back to our rental car to find the window shattered. Someone had broken into the SUV and stolen our laptop bags. More than $10,000 of technology gone. But worse, everything my coworkers and I had been working on for months was in the hands of some thief. There was a feeling of panic among us. How were we gonna do a VidCon without our stuff? My boss's laptop had the most sensitive information on it. Financial documents and contracts that we absolutely needed to make VidCon happen, but it just so happens that right before dinner, he had taken an extra second to tuck his bag a tiny bit further under the seat, and whoever broke the window couldn't quite reach far enough in to grab it. Somehow, the most important laptop of the bunch was left behind. Everyone quickly changed their passwords so we wouldn't have any issues, and since the most important files were safe, we didn't have to cancel VidCon. It was a pretty close call though, and I haven't left my laptop out of my sight since. Also, as long as we're talking about working at VidCon, here's a little bonus story about something that I'm really proud of. I, Timtom, single-handedly built version 1 of the signing lottery. That's the thing VidCon does where you rank the creators you want to see the most, and the system sorts you into the limited spots available as fairly as possible. See? Being a computer nerd has its pretty boring. But every now and again, I'd come across
a funny. It's easy to remember our favorite Vines now, but people forget just how much crap there was, especially in the early days. Nobody had figured out how to make a good Vine, and the recommendation algorithm had yet to advance to the apparently clairvoyant levels of modern TikTok. Still, I had it in my mind that the first people to use a social media app would have an easier time building an audience. Since there's less competition, it's easier to stand out, and as more people join, they'll snowball onto accounts that already have followers. Vine was the next big thing, and I was right there at the beginning. This was my chance. I started to fantasize about what it would be like to have 1,000 followers. I would be famous, and I'd have bulging abs and be super cool. It's so funny to think that if things had gone slightly different, I could have been a Viner. I have always wanted to go to Japan. But I quickly gave up on my Vine dreams when I got hired by Hank Green to go work at VidCon, which I've talked about in a previous video. Looking back at the start of Vine, the thing that stands out to me the most is how some people looked down on it. Some didn't take it seriously because the videos were only 6 seconds long, and certain creators gave the platform a bit of a douchey reputation. Even as it continued to gain widespread popularity, the general sentiment was that Vine was cringy. But years later, people are still quoting their favorite Vines, so they must have been doing something right. Which brings me to TikTok, a relatively new, short-form video app that's launching the careers of a ton of new creators, and despite becoming wildly popular, the general sentiment is one of cringe. To be fair, there is a bucket load of cringy stuff on TikTok, but that's not a problem for 2 reasons. Reason number 1. Hi, I'd like to introduce you to my friend, the whole entire internet. Literally every other website or app is the exact same way. If you build it, they will post thirst traps. That's not TikTok's fault, it's yours, you little weirdos. Okay, the other reason it's not a real problem is that there will always be people who call out new stuff for being cringy or whatever. Some people seem to think that being cynical and saying something is cringy or dumb makes them look smart. After all, they've taken the time to form an opinion, so they must know what they're talking about. I've even fallen into that trap a few times myself. I was once an edgy teen. But then I grew up and I learned that being enthusiastic about stuff is way more fun. All that cynicism really did was alienate the people who liked things that I didn't for no reason. Besides, secret reason number 3. TikTok is surprisingly good at learning what you like, so it doesn't take long before anything that genuinely makes you cringe gets filtered out, unless you're into that sort of thing, you little freak. But the thing I like the most about TikTok is how easy it makes it for anyone to be creative. Staring at a blank page and trying to come up with something funny is surprisingly hard. Coming up with ideas is way easier when you have a starting point or some constraints to work with. I remember one time in my English class, we had to put together a book of poetry. I couldn't figure out what to write until I tried writing a haiku, a poem with 3 lines of 5, 7, and 5 syllables. I noticed that having those constraints actually made it easier to write. It gave me a starting point, and before long I was pumping out haikus left and right. TikTok lets you duet videos and reuse sounds, so right off the bat you have stuff to build on top of. It's sort of an on-ramp to creativity, and my guess is that once someone is comfortable remixing other people's work, they'll be more confident in making something from scratch. I've seen people say that it's just kids lip-syncing and doing trends, but I see a generation of creatives getting their start. And sure, most people won't end up being full-time content creators, but most people won't be mathematicians either. That doesn't mean we shouldn't teach kids math. It's good to make stuff, and I like that TikTok encourages people to try. Of course YouTube does too, and I could go on for hours about how YouTube's enabled more people than ever to make a living being creative. But TikTok takes it up a notch. Like, I think it's huge that thumbnails aren't really a thing on TikTok. On YouTube, you could post a great video, but with a bad thumbnail, nobody'll watch. On TikTok, you can just focus on making videos. You don't also have to be a graphic designer. It's also really common for one of your first TikToks to get a ton of views, which gives way more people a chance at building an audience. That might change, but for now, it seems way easier to build an audience on TikTok than anywhere else. It's also usually much harder than you'd think to get existing fans to make the jump to a new platform. But established creators are also seeing success as TikTokers. Take my old boss Hank, for example. His TikTok is popping off. Mostly he answers important science questions like, is ice a rock? And it turns out that technically it is. So if lava is just melted rock, does that mean that melted ice is also lava? Hank says yes, which means, since people are made of water, that we're all a bunch of lava monsters. Isn't science great? The answer is yes, and also TikTok is great. It took me a while to come around, but now I see that I was missing out. So follow me on TikTok. There's a link in the description. Okay, bye.
Timothy,
Yes, Mama?
did you eat the cookies, Timothy?
No, Mama.
You're lying, Timothy. You know what that means. Lying is bad and you should never do it. Being dishonest with someone might just be the worst thing you can do. It's wrong, it's mean, and if you've ever deceived another, you know the eternal darkness that only an outlaw would call his friend. Anyway, here's a bunch of lies I told as a little kid. Big old juicy ones. One time, I was at my grandma Emma's house while my mom was at work. It was getting close to the end of the day, so at any minute, our blue van was about to round the corner and come pick me up. Yes, I can't wait to see Mom. I could hardly contain myself, so I asked my grandma if I could walk to the end of the block to get a better view of the road. Toddler Tim needed to know the second Mom Tom entered the neighborhood. The latest info, thank you. I need reliable updates or we're not gonna make our quarterly targets and I won't get to keep pretending this is a business. So, Grandma Emma said yes, and I headed to the end of the block. She trusted me to go alone. We were tight like that. So off I went, around the corner, past the neighbor's cactuses, and waited. And waited. Well, I've been here for a good 20, 30 seconds. I better get back to business. Just gonna turn around and... Oh no, my clumsy little toddler feet! I'm going down! Mayday! I tripped and fell next to the cactuses, like in their vicinity. I wasn't in danger of getting pricked. The cactuses didn't even know I was there, but I looked across the sidewalk and was like, I almost died. I ran back to my grandma and told her that I had fallen into the cactuses. In my defense, I wanted kisses, but she was mostly like, looks like you're gonna pull through. She did give me kisses, but when I went into the other room to play, the darkness struck. I've betrayed Grandma Emma's trust. I got kisses, but at what cost? At what cost? I've genuinely held on to the guilt from that lie since I was a kid. And like, kids lie because they haven't been taught more skillful ways to get what they want. I could have just told Grandma I fell and it made me sad, please give me kisses, thank you. But I wanted to look tough. This other time, I had gotten my first bike, and I was pretty excited about it. Even when we weren't home, that's all I could talk about. Can't wait to get home and ride my bike. I taped a radio to my bike so I can listen to tunes when I'm riding my bike. One day, I'll get good enough to take the training wheels off my bike. Yep, love my bike. Anyway, my grandma and I were driving somewhere, and we passed a bike shop. Bob's Bicycles on Fairview Avenue in Boise, Idaho. You know the one. And without thinking, I said, that's where we got my bike. The lie detector determined that was a lie. I had no idea where my mom got my bike. I just wanted to talk about it more. But before I knew it, that ever-familiar darkness crept in. Oh no, how do I make this stop? I know, another lie! But don't ask Mom about it. She gets mad when you talk about Bob. Like the lady who swallowed a spider to catch the fly, I just made things way worse. And now, I was caught in my own web of lies. What if she asks Mom anyway? What if my mom mentions the store she actually got it from? What if my bike breaks and Grandma takes it to Bob's Bicycles to get fixed, but then they tell her that they don't sell that kind of bike, and then my grandma has to drive to all the bike stores in town to find someone who can help her, and then her car breaks down and she gets stranded and dies? That's nice, honey. Of course, now I know that if you're caught up in a lie, you just tell the truth and apologize. Easy. I mean, it's that or live with the guilt for the rest of your life, which, who would do that? Me! The dumbest lie I ever told was in elementary school. I had just gotten a personal data assistant, which was like a smartphone before smartphones were a thing. And let me tell you, that was the only PDA I was gonna get for a while. Wordplay. It had a calculator and a calendar and an address book. It was one of the really cheap ones because a third grader only has so much money. I don't even think it had games, but I loved it because I'm a nerd and it was basically a computer in your pocket. It was neat. But none of the other kids appreciated how cool it was. So, I lied about what it could do. I was like, beep boop, I just ordered a plane ticket. Yep, I got important business to do. You should be so impressed. I'm booking a hotel right now. And one girl was like, no, you're not. She thought I was pretty cool. Later that day, it fell out of my desk. And when I was scooting my chair in, I crushed it. The screen was destroyed, and so was I. Hello, darkness. My old friend. Well, at least they won't know I lied. When you're done with that, mow the lawn. Hey, it's been a while. So one of my patrons got the perk where I'll read lines for a video, and her video just happens to also be about lying, which is like, oh my god, no way. And she got another big YouTuber to read lines in the This is pretty embarrassing, so please be nice to me. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be a genius. I didn't really know what that meant, but I had a vague idea that it would be good. I had always been told that I was smart, but what if I was actually the smartest? That would be good. So I came up with a plan. What if I filled my desk with like diagrams and sine waves? You know, the kinds of things that geniuses draw. Then my teacher would find them and she would be like, whoa, Timtom, did you draw these? And I would be like, oh no, you found my genius papers, how embarrassing. And then she would be like, we gotta get this kid to genius school, stat. Like a lot of people, I wanted so desperately to be special. I always felt kind of different from other kids, and my little 8-year-old self thought maybe, 'cause I'm a genius. But my teacher never found my genius papers, so I guess we'll never know. I did have a recurring dream that I could fly, which a lot of people have, but in my dream, I was the only one on the whole playground that could fly. I was special, at least in the dream, and all my dream friends thought it was the coolest thing, and I was the most popular kid in school because of it. People liked me because I could do something that no one else could. I was the best, and it felt great. Now, when I was in the 4th grade, my class was split into 3 groups for math, and I was the only 4th grader in the advanced group. I felt pretty special being alongside a bunch of 5th graders, you know? I was 2 years ahead, which is like 1 more than anyone else. Told you I was good at math. And I was already in the advanced class, which I just made a video about, so that made me feel extra smart. Some might even say, genius-like. The next year, some of my classmates and I would spend mornings at the junior high learning 7th grade math. I wasn't the youngest anymore, but I still felt like I was one of the smart kids. I was still special. Around that time in my recurring dream, there were some other kids that had figured out how to fly. I wasn't the only one on the playground with superpowers anymore, but I could still fly higher than them, so it was okay. The next year, when I was in the 6th grade, an even bigger group of kids and I would spend our mornings getting bused across town and back to an even more different school to learn 8th grade math and science. Since the school was so far away, I had to wake up at 5 a.m. to catch the bus. But to make matters worse, I learned that a cartoon I really liked aired at midnight, and so I would stay up late to sneak in some TV because I have no self-control. All through the 6th grade, I was averaging like 5 hours of sleep each night, and of course, this was a recipe for disaster. A sleep-deprived 6th grader is no match for geometry and physics. I failed both classes. That dream I had some nights about flying and impressing all of my classmates turned into a dream about watching other kids fly. It used to be that air felt like water and I could just swim around the playground, but now, no matter how hard I pushed on the air, it just didn't push back. If only I had learned more physics. For years, all I wanted was to be special. I wanted to be the best at math. If I was going to be different, I at least wanted it to be because of something good. If I was a genius, then surely people would like me. But having to take that math class twice and only being 1 year ahead sucked eggs, dude. It felt like any hope of being truly special had been crushed, which is a little melodramatic, but just because you're young doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. The reality is that I probably won't ever be the best at anything. Hopefully I'll go far and accomplish great things, but there'll always be someone better at math or dream flying. And you know what? That's okay. It won't stop me from... I used to be scared of a lot of things. And I still am. Just kidding. I think most of the things I've been afraid of in my life are pretty normal. I used to be scared of the dark. I still kind of have a fear of spiders. And of course I'm scared that soon I'll be forgotten, so everything I do might be meaningless. I'm also afraid of heights, I think. Like, okay, you know that feeling you get when you're at the top of a building and you look down and your whole stomach goes... Well, that's your body telling you to be afraid and careful, and also maybe, hey, psst, get down from there, stop it. Well, I think I got some wires crossed in my brain because the first time I felt my stomach do that, I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. Whenever I'd go to the mall, I'd make it a point to walk near the railings on the 2nd floor and look over the edge to see if I could get my tummy to do the thing, and it would be like, it did the thing. But now, I don't really get that feeling unless I'm really high up, which is a shame. Going to the mall used to be like riding a roller coaster, and now it's like going shopping. Gross. I think the Mall of America has a roller coaster in it, but that's in Minnesota, so I can't go because I'm afraid of spending all my money on plane tickets. I've never been afraid to fly though, because you're more likely to get hurt while driving, and I do that all the time. Besides, when the plane takes off, you feel like you're in a race car, you get free snacks, and when you hit turbulence, your tummy does the thing. Whee! But I am scared of small spaces, I think. Like, okay, my old house had a linen closet with little built-in shelves, and when the door shut, there was still a little space in there. And when I was like 10, I was small enough to just squeeze in. You'd think that would trigger all of the claustrophobia, but since I could open the door, it wasn't scary. But then one time, I showed my sister that I could fit in there, and she held the door shut until I cried and begged her to let me out, and then she laughed at me for crying. Luckily, most fears seem to fade as you get older, but sometimes the opposite can happen. So that's fun. As a teen, I was never afraid of needles or blood, and I was kind of proud of that. I was like, I'm not afraid of needles or blood, and I'm kind of proud of that. So dumb. But then it turns out that things change, which, side note, who thought that was a good idea? And now when I get my blood drawn or even think about needles, my skin starts to crawl and my hands get real weak. And look, they're not too strong to begin with, so how exactly do you expect me to hold on to this orange juice, the Red Cross? I know I got the good blood and I want to save lives too, but you've been calling me like a jealous vampire ex-girlfriend for the past 3 months, and it's got me so worked up that I'm not even sure if that last line makes sense. Do vampires get jealous?
I wanted to suck your blood, but not anymore.
A lot of people are scared of earthquakes, which is fair because they destroy buildings and trigger tsunamis, but I've been in enough small ones where nothing happened that I think I've learned to have the exact wrong reaction when the ground starts shaking. Whee! I'm also not afraid of elevators like some people, because like planes, they're really safe. But one time I was in an elevator during an earthquake and the doors got stuck for a bit. I thought we were gonna be trapped for longer, and that was kinda scary, but then the doors popped open and I was like, I've learned nothing! I wonder what other not scary things you can combine to make a scary thing. I'm not afraid of cats or dogs, but the show Cat Dog kept me up as a kid. How do they poop? A car with legs would be pretty terrifying, but that doesn't exist. Yet. It's probably no surprise that the thing I've been most afraid of in my life is horror movies. They're designed to scare you, and as a kid, I would get wrapped up in the lore and completely believe everything the movie said. All the other kids are like, haha, ooh, spooky, and I'm sitting there taking notes like, so you can contact your dead wife with a tape recorder, but demons will haunt and kill you. Fascinating. And I'm not gonna lie, after watching a horror movie, when the house is real dark, the rest of the family is asleep, and there's a gentle creak in the hallway, my heart still does a little drum fill. But at least now that I'm a grown-up, I know it's probably just a clown, and they only want to see you smile. Forever. Haha, 2 videos in 2 days. I was in the industry lounge at VidCon looking for something to eat when I saw my favorite YouTubers. They make some of the best videos I've ever seen, and of all the people I'd want to collab with, they're at the top of the list. Of course, I'm talking about none other than William Osman and cameraman John. Alright, I know you want to hear about David Dobrik, but hold tight. This'll all make sense in a second. I went over to William and John to introduce myself, and I was really nervous, but they ended up being incredibly nice people. They even traded some cat stickers for one of my pins. If you don't know about their channel, I highly recommend it. One time they put hoverboard motors on a shopping cart, which is about as dangerous as it sounds, and another time they laser cut a bunch of ham into the shape of Vin Diesel's head. It's very important work. Anyway, it turns out that they brought the shopping cart to VidCon, and William gave me his phone number so we could meet up and play around with it later, which was extra exciting because if I got hurt, can you imagine the clickbait? Robot shopping cart broke my arm? But here's the thing. That night, something happened that was way better than breaking my arm. I saw David Dobrik at a party. The king of clickbait. Obviously, I had to tell him about the shopping cart, but it looked like he was about to leave, so I didn't have much time. I ran over to David and didn't even bother to introduce myself or ask if he had any cat stickers. My friend has a remote control shopping cart that can pop wheelies and would be perfect for your vlog.
What?
My friend put hoverboard motors on a shopping cart. It's in his hotel room. It'd be great for your vlog.
Cool. You want my phone number?
Yeah. I kind of fumbled my phone out of my pocket and handed it to him. To me, the most incredible part of this whole story is how fast he typed his number into my phone. It literally took 2 seconds. I can't explain it, but it was magical. While I was sitting there wondering if there's anything David's not good at, he leaned in and very firmly said,
Let's do this tomorrow.
And then vanished. I might have just been in shock, but I honestly don't remember him walking away. Now, I know it's hard to believe that someone as cool and very super famous as me would even be fazed by this situation, but I just made a promise to one of the most popular YouTubers ever that another YouTuber, who I just met, would let him use and probably break an expensive thing he built. Please be the good timeline. I ran out of the party all business mode and called William Osman super dramatically.
Oh. Hey man, what's up?
I just met David Dobrik, and I told him he could use the shopping cart in his vlog. When are you free tomorrow?
I think anytime after 2 works.
So I texted my best friend, David Dobrik, the details and went to bed like it was Christmas Eve. The next day, when I was waiting in the hotel lobby with William and John, David wasn't replying to my texts, which is really odd because he normally does, so I was just anxiously waiting for David to text me. This must be how Liza feels. Or felt.
Oof. Too soon.
Oh, sorry, I'll cut that.
Leave it in. It's funny.
I walked outside to meet everyone, and he immediately started filming. Also, I noticed he does this thing where he holds the camera to his chest so people don't know they're being filmed, but I saw right through that trick. Yeah, best friends are like that. Security kicked us out in record time, which was super impressive because Jonah wasn't even in any real danger yet. So we walked to the front of the hotel, and right as I had this moment of, wow, I can't believe I made all of this happen, we got completely surrounded by people excited to see David and Casey. Oh yeah, did I mention that Casey Neistat was there? You need to know that for when I get to the part where the police show up. So the police showed up and asked who was in charge, and David was all, everyone, I guess, which is like, dude, don't drag me into this. Then the cop asked if we knew we need licenses and insurance to film in public, and Casey, who's a stone cold killer, goes, officer, we never even touch a camera without getting a license, and I couldn't help but burst out laughing. And normally cops don't like it when people laugh in their faces, but I'm super white, so it didn't matter. I think that was about the time that an SUV drove by, and Liza Koshy popped her head out of the window to say hi to David real quick, which doesn't matter to the story at all, but I still needed to tell you. Anyway, we ended up going to the parking lot of another hotel that didn't seem to care as much, and David filmed Jonah getting totally shreked by the shopping cart for like half an hour.
It's kind of like being in a bull, because he has no control over it. Oh my! That hurt really bad. Hold on the entire time. What? Jesus.
That might be a wrap.
Mac, I'm gone now. Cool. I never really wanted to get my driver's license. Most kids were super excited to start driving so they could go to the mall without their parents or whatever, but I was what my mom calls weird. I never even asked to start driver's ed. My mom just enrolled me one day. Thanks, Mom. Driver's ed was really early in the morning, before school even started. 0 hour. And I couldn't even be a little late or I'd fail, which I guess makes sense because you don't want people on the road who missed stop sign day, but I didn't ask to be there, and waking up at 6 is definitely my least favorite thing. Besides, I didn't even care about driving. What, you couldn't wait a year, Mom? One time, a cop came in and gave us a talk about how cars are 2-ton death machines. He ended the speech by asking what the most dangerous thing on his belt was, and I answered, your gun. But the cop looked at us knowingly, held up his keys and said, these are the most dangerous thing on my belt. Which, no. I'm pretty sure keys are not more dangerous than a gun. Not unless you're bad at aiming, or very creative. Class basically consisted of just learning traffic laws, which seemed okay until my first driving practice when I got in the car and realized they never actually told me how to, drive. I knew one pedal makes the car go, and nothing else. I was horribly unprepared. And to make it worse, I'd been paired up with the coolest kids in the class, so they got to sit in the back seat and judge me. It seems pretty irresponsible to put someone behind the wheel of a 2-ton death machine without actually telling them how to use it. That's like if you showed up to math class on the first day of school, and if you can't find the area under a curve, you die. After I circled the parking lot once, the instructor told me to get on the road, which seemed a little soon. I don't even remember how I stopped, dude, but I left the parking lot and came to my first intersection. The light was red, and I stopped. So far, so good. When the light turned green, I started moving again. A little slowly, but whatever. I was driving. A little ways down the road, I hit my second intersection, but stopped flawlessly. This was only my first time, and I was nailing it. The instructor leaned over, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, usually, you go at green lights. Now, you're not going to believe this, but he was right. At the time, I thought my driving instructor was so cool. When we'd meet for driving practice, he'd be like, do you guys want to drive to Burger King? And all of us would get real excited, like, yeah, you can do that? And when we were driving, he'd be like, hey, let's stop at that gas station. We don't need gas. I just want a Red Bull. I actually can't remember a time I saw him without an energy drink. He was always very awake. A little while after I passed the class, it was finally time for me to take the test for my driver's license, which I still didn't care about, but someone made me schedule it. And okay, I think every state is different, but the way Idaho does road tests is real shady. The DMV gives you a list of phone numbers to pick from, and you just call some dude who tells you where to meet him. On the day of the appointment, my mom and I sat in a Winco parking lot until someone knocked on the window like some kind of driver's license drug dealer. He climbed in the car and didn't say anything for a bit, so I wasn't totally convinced he was the right guy, but he pulled out a clipboard, and that's how I knew he wasn't a threat. The test started and we drove around for a bit, changed lanes, went over a bridge, and I didn't stop at even one green light. When it was over, we went back to the parking lot and I sat there quietly just waiting to hear if I passed. I mean, I didn't care, I just didn't want to have to do it all over again, that's all. After a couple minutes of silence, he goes, better than the average bear. Whew. Wait, bears can't drive. When my sister got her license, she spent months saving. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love computers. I'm a little nerd boy, and I've always been fascinated by the idea of hacking. Even before I really knew what that was, it just seemed cool. It was a mysterious world that only a select few understood. But it doesn't need to be mysterious. It's actually a pretty chill place, and I'd like to show you around. But first, a word from our sponsor. All right, so there's this brand called Mischief, and every 2 weeks they do a drop. What's a drop, I hear you ask? Good question. See this? It could be anything. Sometimes it's a physical thing you can buy, like a dog collar that curses whenever your dog barks. Here's the thing though, that one sold out in seconds and got on national news shows, so you've probably seen their drops and didn't even know it was them. Sometimes the drops are digital, like the time they made a font exactly like Times New Roman but wider, so you can cheat on your next English paper. You're welcome. Anyway, they just released an app, so you can be the first to find out what the next drop is. No two drops are the same, and some of them are secrets only available in the app. See where I'm going with this? No, because I haven't said it yet. The app has a messaging feature, and I'm not sure who the messages get sent to, but somebody at Mischief has to read them, right? So I thought it would be funny if all 1.5 million of you downloaded the app and spammed them with, I don't know, that part's up to you. Poop emojis, Shakespearean poetry, the entire B-movie script. Mischief specifically told me not to say anything about spamming the messenger because it'll bring down their servers or something, but I'm gonna go ahead and file that under good problems to have, so I may never get another sponsor, but if we can take down some servers with poop emojis, well, I think that'd be pretty funny. Please go to mschf.com and troll my sponsors. I heard they like Mischief. What is hacking? Most people probably think it's illegal, and to be fair, sometimes it is, but the definition that I like is getting technology to do something that it wasn't originally supposed to do. Sure, that could be something like hacking a bank's computer to give you $1 million. It certainly wasn't supposed to do that. But it could also be jailbreaking your phone, and there's nothing illegal about that, no matter what Apple wants you to believe. So when I was young and fascinated by the idea of computer hacking, I would search the internet for how to hack and read tons of articles and blog posts about how computer systems work and how to break into them. But one time I made the mistake of trying to share that passion with my sister. All she saw was a big old juicy opportunity to get me in trouble. She was like, "Mom, Timtom's hacking into the government. He's gonna go to prison." And I was like, "Nuh-uh, hacking isn't necessarily illegal. It's just about getting computers to do stuff that the original designers never intended." And Mom Tom was like, "I'm not doing this right now." Despite my sister's best efforts, I learned so many cool hacking tricks that I was basically Keanu Reeves. The only problem was, a ton of the information I found was outdated and super worthless. For example, back in the 90s, when you put a quarter into a payphone, it would play certain tones down the line to tell the phone system that you paid. But if you recorded those tones on something like a tape recorder and played them into the handset, the phone system would think that you paid and let you make calls for free. Neat. But back when I tried it, payphones had switched to digital systems that weren't vulnerable to that hack, and modern payphones don't exist. Thinking back on it, a lot of the information I found was about how the phone system works, or used to work, which kind of makes sense. Phones were the network that connected everybody's homes and businesses before the internet was a thing, and phone hacking, or phreaking as the cool kids called it, used to be a big part of being a hacker. My favorite thing that I learned from my phreaking days almost did get me in trouble with the police. Basically, I learned how those old rotary phones worked, and I figured out that I could dial a phone number by just taking the phone off the hook a bunch of times in the right pattern, kind of like Morse code. I thought the idea of dialing a phone number without pressing any buttons was neat, but I also didn't expect it to work. So I used that trick to dial the first phone number I could think of. 911. Once the phone started ringing, my heart sank and I hung up, but it was too late. The police had already traced the call. The cops showed up to my house like 30 minutes later, and I was just like, "Whoa, gee willikers, well, I sure didn't dial 911. Yep, I didn't press any buttons at all." And I got away with it, like a totally elite hacker. Now, I don't think movies are responsible for my fascination with computers or hacking, but they definitely fueled that flame. My favorite movie of all time is Hackers, a movie that came out when I was a baby. There's a scene in the movie where one of the characters uses that phone hook trick to call someone, and a different scene where he uses the tape recorder trick to use a payphone for free. Most of the hacking in the movie is unrealistic and just looks cool. But there's tons of parts where the characters use actual hacks, and the movie doesn't call attention to it, they just do it like it's no big deal. When I first saw that, I was ecstatic, like, that would actually work! Or at least it would have, back in the day. Nowadays, hacking doesn't revolve around the phone system nearly as much, and as I've gotten older, I'm usually less interested in breaking stuff. But I still think that mentality is a great way to look at the world. Instead of accepting things as they are or as they were intended to be, approaching everything with a little bit of mischief just makes life more interesting. Part of growing up is learning more about how the world works, and one of the ways you learn is by experimenting, trying stuff, because why not? I don't know what'll happen, and besides, it could be fun. So it's only natural to look back at stuff you did when you were younger and had less experience and think, why would I do that? Knowing what you know now, it seems dumb, but you wouldn't know what you know now if you hadn't tried what you did then, which is mostly my way of justifying the dumb stuff I did when I was a kid, so you don't judge me, because I didn't know any better, okay? I was just a sweet, innocent child trying to find his way in a cruel and confusing world. Some of the dumb stuff I did as a kid wasn't that big of a deal, and is honestly kind of adorable. Like one time, I got a cardboard box, I brought it to the top of the stairs, climbed in, and slid down, like a roller coaster, made of cardboard. 5-year-old Timtom didn't know what would happen once he ran out of stairs. However, thanks to past Tim's sacrifice/experiment, we now know that the box will explode, and the sole passenger will indeed smack the concrete floor of the basement, and it will hurt, and much like a baby bird/fighter pilot, he will lay there in shock before shouting, "Mayday!" Because that's what you're supposed to shout when you're in trouble, apparently. Speaking of stairs, when I was younger and smaller, I would climb stairs on all fours. I'd lean over and go into animal mode. Something about it just felt faster, and I think it's probably a more efficient way to climb stairs when you're little, you know? But the thing is, I only lived in a house with stairs for about a year when I was 5, so I built that habit when I was young. But then we moved to a place that didn't have stairs, which meant I never really had the opportunity to outgrow it. As far as my body was concerned, the best way to climb stairs was still like a dog. It just came naturally. So years later, when I was a teenager, I remember going over to a friend's house for the first time, and when we went up the stairs to his room, my muscle memory kicked in and I clambered up the stairs with all the coordination of a greased up baby deer. Both him and his mom were like, what you doing there? And sure, that's kind of embarrassing, but old habits die hard, so as much as I knew it looked weird for me to rumble up the stairs like that, I probably only had 1 or 2 opportunities a week to break that habit and practice walking like a normal person. So every time I went over to his house, I would go back on autopilot and continue to climb the stairs like a total weirdo. I'm not the only one that climbs stairs like that, right, guys? Guys?
Okay, I'll just be over here if you need me.
One time I pooped in the bushes. Don't worry, this one also happened when I was 5. I'm not going around pooping all willy-nilly as an adult. Go over to a friend's house. Excuse me, could you point me toward your shrubbery? So I was at a playground, and there was a huge bush that had this little tunnel through the middle, just big enough for a little kid to walk through. And on either side of the tunnel, the bush had what I can only describe as 2 tiny rooms in it. For some reason, the boys on the playground were taking turns going into the bush and peeing in one of the little rooms. And at this point, you can probably guess the rest of the story. I needed to go number 2, and I figured that if one of the rooms was for peeing, then the other must be for pooping. I will remind you that I was only 5. A 5-year-old without TP. This is where my memory of the situation goes about as fuzzy as an analog TV in a blizzard. I don't know if I admitted to my mom what happened, or if I just pulled my pants up and dealt with it later. Either way, the whole ordeal was very uncomfortable. But at least that time, I was the only victim of my stupidity. If you don't count my mom having to put up with a smelly boy. Another time, and again, I was only 5 and couldn't possibly have known better, I saw someone do that classic magic trick in a movie where they rip a tablecloth out from under a bunch of plates and silverware and everything stays in roughly the same place. That's because of a little thing called inertia. But I didn't know physics when I was a kid, so when I tried, I failed to properly account for several variables. Here's how it went down. One of my friends came over to play, and I was excited to show off a new trick I saw on the TV, but I didn't have a tablecloth or anything to put on it, so I looked around the house until I found something close enough. The bath mat in the bathroom was kind of like a tablecloth, so I had her stand on it and yanked it as hard as I could. Instead of effortlessly slipping out from under her like I expected, her feet flew out from under her with the bath mat, and she slammed her head on the edge of the bathtub. And she didn't make it very long before bursting into tears. My mom rushed in and asked what happened, and I didn't want to get in trouble, so I said that she fell, which is technically true. Please don't judge me, I feel awful enough. But one of my favorite stories to tell from when I was a kid happened a few years later. One hot summer weekend, my mom installed a brand new ceiling fan in our living room. That doesn't seem important, but stick with me. Not long after, one of my friends and my sister and I were hanging out in the living room trying to cool off. My mom poked her head in to tell us she was gonna run to the post office real quick and would be back in about 10 minutes. A little while after she left, my sister went to the kitchen and grabbed a few cans of soda and a ballpoint pen. She explained to us that the rivet that holds a can's pull tab on is in the exact center of the can, and you can use a pen to punch a hole in it.
So, she put a hole in the top of a can, covered it with her finger, gave it a little shake, and then drank some soda by shooting it into her mouth. It was kinda cool, and my friend very enthusiastically tried it out for himself. But he shook his can way harder than necessary, and I guess he didn't have great aim because when he went to drink, all he got was a nose full of carbonation. When he pulled his head out of the line of fire, the jet stream just kept going. It absolutely covered the ceiling and my mom's brand new ceiling fan. My sister and I just looked up, frozen in horror, having no idea what to do. Before we could even finish processing what just happened, my mom walked in with a big smile on her face that lasted for about 2 seconds before shouting meant saving up for flights to see each other would take roughly forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. One of my friends in high school, we'll call her Schmarley, used to live in England, and while she lived there, she made some friends, as you do. But then, her family moved back to the us, and her friends didn't come with her. Typical. Fast forward a few years, and one of Schmarley's British friends decided to come visit. Naturally, Schmarley introduced her old friend to her new friends. That's me, which is how I met my future British ex-girlfriend. When we all met up for the first time, we thought it would be a good idea to get some grocery store fried chicken. You know, the good stuff, and have a little picnic while we got to know each other. But there was some miscommunication, and we didn't get everyone together until it was already dark out, and the chicken was cold. Also, we forgot paper plates and napkins. So there we were, a bunch of 17-year-olds sitting around a picnic table in the dark, trying not to get chicken grease all over our dumb little faces while we talked to the new girl. I didn't really know what she looked like on account of how dark it was, but I had a crush almost immediately. You see, there was this thing, so when she talked, I liked how it sounded. Look, I just have a small brain, and when it hears a British accent, it goes, "Oh, that's pretty." We didn't get to hang out for long, but after she left, we stayed in touch. Eventually, I got up the courage to tell her that I had a bit of a crush on her, and to my surprise, she told me that on the night we first hung out, she thought to herself, "Blimey, he's the funniest guy I ever met, governor." Nailed it. We lived almost 5,000 miles apart from each other. Neither of us had a job, but for some reason, we thought it would be a good idea to date. Spoiler, it wasn't. She lived 7 hours ahead of me, and our school schedules didn't really align, so it was basically impossible to talk at normal hours. I remember regularly staying up late to call and talk while she got ready for school. Now, my sleep schedule has never been great, but that year was by far the worst it's ever been, and honestly, it took a massive toll on me. I even ended up failing a few classes because of how zonked I was. And again, none of this was her fault. I was a dumb kid in love. What was I supposed to do? Not talk to her constantly? I know I say this all the time, but just because you're young doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. There was very little reason for either of us to feel this way, but for the 2 years between that late night chicken picnic and eventually closing that chapter in our lives, we had an extremely close connection to each other, which is the other reason long distance relationships suck. Being separated from each other was excruciating. Like, I spent the better part of a year just yearning. I yearned so hard. "Hey Tim, what you doing after school?" "Oh, nothing much. I'm just gonna go home and yearn." Ugh, and don't even get me started on the longing. I yearned and longed for days at a time, and that's just no way to live. Anyway, we talked as much as we could. She introduced me to the wonders of British television. I told her facts about the solar system. Pretty normal romantic stuff. Did you know that it takes less energy to leave the solar system from Earth than it does to fly into the sun? That's pretty sexy. I saved what I could, and after graduation, I had enough to go visit. Someone told me that to travel internationally, you need a passport and a visa. Not like the credit card, but a thing from England that says you're allowed to be there. So I bought my plane ticket, I got my passport, and I applied for a visa. Then, about a week before the trip, I got a letter saying my visa application was denied. Nice. That's when I decided to Google it. I remember it said that you don't need a visa for a short visit, but it didn't say how long short was. Thanks, Google. Is that a day? A week? I don't know, but I already had my plane ticket. So despite the British government having directly told me that I couldn't go, I did a little thing called do it anyway. I was pretty sure that all I needed was a signed letter from her mom saying I had a place to stay. But there was one tiny little baby problem. Her family was on holiday that week and they didn't have cell service. To get that letter, I'd have to break out my master hacking skills. We'd have a small window of opportunity between when she was scheduled to get home and when I'd be boarding my flight. I had a week to solve this puzzle, but the plan was simple. Find out if one of her neighbors had a fax machine. Shmanda would get home, print and sign the letter, then run down the street to a neighbor who had already been briefed on the time-sensitive situation and whose fax machine would be revved up and ready to go. Then on my way to the airport, I'd swing by my mom's office, pick up the letter from their fax machine, and be on my way. Google, guide my mouse. I looked up the street she lived on and found someone in the most random way. A dog show judge lived 2 houses away and had a phone and fax number listed online. So I called a complete stranger in another country and asked if my girlfriend could use their fax machine. Of course, it should be no surprise that it totally worked. Nice. So I got the letter, got on the plane, and made it to England. The lady who interviewed me before I was allowed to leave the airport asked if I had ever been denied entry to the UK. I wasn't sure if my rejected visa counted since I didn't technically need it in the first place, so I said no, and then she just walked away.
Okay, I'll just wait here, I guess.
I knew I shouldn't have come. I can't believe I thought they'd let me into the country with a fax and a smile. Anyone can get at least one of those.
But she came back and I was free to go. Something about riding in a car makes me tired, and I didn't get great sleep on the plane, so when I got in my girlfriend's mom's car, I passed out immediately. In fact, I was pretty jet-lagged the entire trip, so I fell asleep in the back of her car practically every time we went anywhere. It made the trip feel like a dream. Wake up? Oh, the London Eye. Back to sleep. Wake up? Ah, cheeky Nando's. Back to sleep. Wake up? Wow. A third thing. We went to Brighton Pier, and there were some dudes trying to parkour over the rail to the rocky beach below, but a few of them were too scared to drop. Being a bit of a traceur myself, I decided to show off and make the jump without hesitating. At first, they looked down in amazement, but I just had to open my dumb American mouth and say, "It was easy, guys." One of them must not have been super stoked to be shown up by a dumb American, because as I climbed the stairs to leave, a rock hit me straight in the face. He might suck at parkour, but dude's got an arm. I'm not even mad, the accuracy was astonishing. That whole trip was easily one of my favorite life experiences, but it was over before I knew it. Back to yearning, I guess. Eventually, my girlfriend saved enough to return the favor and come visit me for 2 weeks. But flights were cheaper into San Francisco, so my mom and I drove down to California to pick her up and thought we could do some sightseeing while we were there. I only remember one thing from that trip, and it has haunted me ever since. We were at a gift shop in Fisherman's Wharf, which I know sounds more like a Pokemon than a neighborhood, but stick with me, this is important. My mom was chatting with the shop owner, and when I walked over to them, she introduced me. He noticed that I was tall and said, "You must play basketball." But when I told him I didn't, he replied without missing a beat. "Ah, so computers." Yeah. Wait, do all tall people either play basketball or like computers? Because I love computers. How did he know? At first, I thought maybe my mom said something, but apparently she didn't. This man took one look at me and read me like a book. Did he have some kind of Terminator vision? What else did he know? Unfortunately, we left before it set in just how much I needed to know how he knew. Computers are like my whole thing, dude. It couldn't have been a lucky guess, right? Am I really that obvious? What does it all mean? Who am I? Anyway, the rest of her visit was much less ominous, and we had a lot of fun. Then she went back to England, I got my first job, and we both got busy with other things. We didn't have time to talk as much as we used to, and slowly but surely, we drifted apart. One day, I asked if maybe we should just be friends, and she said yes. We still talked occasionally, but at some point, she went on another holiday without it. Becoming a YouTuber has changed my perspective on a lot of things. I think the biggest is how I react to bad stuff. Because if something awful happens, if the absolute worst thing you can imagine happens to me, at the very least, I can turn it into a video. And really, the worse things are, the better the story. So when something in my life goes wrong, there's a tiny part of me that's like, yes! Content! YouTube has turned me into the ultimate optimist, because now, even the darkest of clouds can have a silver lining. So strap in, because my idiot self just went camping with some friends, and so many things went wrong that if we don't make it into a video, I might actually die. New pants! Let's go! It was a beautiful day in Southern California. Like most YouTubers, I live in LA now. RIP Boise, you will be missed. And I had the bright idea to go camping. I should go camping with some friends, I said to myself, like a crazy person, and I called up some friends to see what they thought.
I don't know. I'm pretty busy,
said Jordan, busily. Please, we'll have fun in the sun and sleep under the stars and make s'mores over a nice warm fire. It wouldn't be camping without s'mores. And, you need to be here at like 6 a.m. Does that work?
Okay, but do you promise it'll be super duper fun?
Sure. Then I called Hazel and Alyssa and somehow made the outdoors sound like a pleasant change of pace for making videos instead of the Machiavellian hell world we were blissfully unaware of and that would soon consume our souls. They were down to clown. So I went to Target to get a tent, some water, and a jump on those concrete balls out front because I might be in my 20s, but I will never not climb on Target's balls. Now, there were a few things I didn't buy, and a few of those were even on purpose. Like, in my mind, we didn't need air mattresses. That would be too bougie. If we brought air mattresses, we might as well bring flat screen TVs. Where would we plug them in? A tree? Also, I didn't think that I needed to drop a ton of money on a camping stove because I saw like one Bon Appetit video where teen heartthrob and best YouTuber without a Twitter account, Brad Leone, cooks a steak over a campfire and was like, yeah, I'm an expert. Thanks a lot, Brad. Just kidding, I love you. It turns out that an air mattress and proper cooking equipment are pretty important if your plan is to venture into the wilderness and, you know, survive. Like, you didn't even finish Boy Scouts, you absolute child. I didn't know where a good place to camp would be, so I just kinda picked one. Most of the time, I really agonize over decisions. You know, see the whole picture, cover all the angles. But for this trip, I kinda figured that a campsite was a campsite, and it didn't really matter where we went. Spoiler, I was wrong. So the day came and we headed up the mountain. The road was twisting and turning, and I kinda started to feel sick, but I wasn't gonna let that get me down. We were camping! Further up the mountain, a cute little squirrel scampered out in front of us on that narrow gravel road. And I don't think he had ever seen a car before because he stood there in awe, as if this 2-ton chunk of alien metal flying toward him was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And I hope it was, because it was also the last thing he would ever see. We got to the campsite and there were some trees, but none of them were really tall enough or positioned correctly to provide any useful shade. We unloaded all the food and realized that we forgot the marshmallows, and the graham crackers, and the chocolate, so we couldn't make s'mores, but I wasn't gonna let that get me down. We were camping! We sat around for a bit and played some games, got some sun, talked about our feelings, got some more sun. We forgot the sunscreen. Who wants burgers? I pulled out the firewood and started to make a fire, but we didn't have any lighter fluid, and I thought that we didn't need an axe because the firewood was pre-cut, right? Wrong. Okay, clearly I'm not an expert, but I think it would have been easier to get going if some of the pieces were smaller and covered in lighter fluid. Or gasoline. Anyway, I saw this thing about how chips are flammable, so the minute I realized our big bag of chips could be used as kindling, I took it away from everyone. No eat. Only burn. But apparently, bridges are the only thing I'm capable of burning because despite my best efforts, the fire was a ridiculously smoky mess that nobody could get cozy comfortable next to without being blinded by a jet stream of ash and despair. We tried to cook burgers over the fire, and like a couple of them didn't taste too bad, but it had taken so long to get things going that everyone was pretty absurdly hungry, so I think literally anything would have seemed appetizing at that point. Even half-cooked burgers that made Hazel get sick and throw up. But none of that could get us down because we were camping.
During the day, the surface temperature of Mars can reach 20 degrees Celsius or about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. If not for the thin, nearly oxygenless atmosphere, we Earthlings might consider it comfortable. But during the Martian night, which is only slightly longer than our own, temperatures plunge to minus 153 degrees Celsius. Far too cold for life, as we know it, to survive.
The sun went down at the campsite, and I gotta tell ya, I would rather have slept on Mars. Jordan had long since set up shop in the Jeep and was somewhat spared from the horrors that were about to befall the rest of us. Hazel was up through the night, sick as ever. Alyssa's extremities were so cold that she had to pretend her feet didn't exist to deal with the pain. Everybody was sunburnt, and to top it all off, the ground was so bumpy and sharp that it really hurt my back. We went to bed early to try and just end it all as quickly as possible, but you can only sleep so much. We woke up well before sunrise and found it impossible to fall back asleep, so we broke down the tents and packed everything up in the horrible frozen darkness. I don't think we left anything behind, but even if my fingers had fallen off, I wouldn't have noticed or honestly even cared. Despite all of that, I still had a lot of fun hanging out with my friends. It definitely wasn't worth it, but hey, at least we got a video out of it. Rest in peace, Squirrelston. My first job was at a hardware store. I just needed a job for the summer, you know? Get a little extra cash, buy a laptop for school. And when the application asked, when are you available? I was like, always. It's summer, dummy. Which was a mistake, cause it got me the job. On the first day, we did the whole orientation thing. They taught us the history of the company and how to use the registers. This was my first job, so I had no idea what to expect, and I really wanted to do well. So I was paying close attention and taking notes. I don't want to brag, but I'm pretty smart. I graduated high school a whole year early, so I know how to pay attention.
Fun fact, the first store in the chain I worked at put empty boxes on the top shelves to make it look like they had more of everything in stock. I know this because I paid attention. Early on, I was scheduled for the opening shift, so I had to be at the store at like 5:30 in the morning. There was a strict protocol for opening the store. Everyone was supposed to wait in their cars until the manager walked outside and signaled for them to come in. If he didn't walk out by a certain time, we were supposed to call the cops. Easy. The only problem was, they didn't tell us that during orientation. And I know, because I paid attention. So I showed up early, parked my car, and headed to the building. There was another employee out front watering the flowers. I went up to the automatic doors, but they didn't open, so I thought I'd ask the flower guy. And he was like,
"When did you say you were available when you applied for this job?"
Which was a little confusing. I wrote always, how do I get inside? And he said,
"My nephew tried to get a cashier job, but he's got class on Tuesdays."
Okay, but the doors aren't working, so... Then he told me to just go bang on the doors a bunch because the manager probably forgot to unlock them. So I did, and guess what? The manager came out and freaking yelled at me. When I told him nobody ever told me about the protocol, you know what he said? "You must not have been paying attention." Later, I asked one of the other new cashiers if the protocol was even mentioned during orientation, and they told me no. They had to have it explained to them by someone else. So not only was the manager already mad at me for something they didn't tell me, the flower guy was trying to get me fired. Awesome! I really tried to like that job, and some of the people that I worked with were super nice, but one thing that I didn't like was the garden center. The garden register was in this glass box with a broken fan that felt like an actual oven, and there was a security camera that I'm pretty sure was only there to watch me, because if I walked out of the oven or sat down, someone would come out and tell me to climb back into the oven and stand up. I understand that it looks unprofessional if an employee is sitting down all the time, but what difference does it make if nobody's around? For hours! You trying to bake me like a ham? But every now and then, there would be a huge tsunami of customers all wanting to check out at the same time. The line would wrap all the way to the back of the store. I'm working as fast as I can and people are getting impatient, so I call for backup and keep working. But nobody shows up, so I get through everyone by myself. That's when another cashier strolls into the garden center and asks, "I thought you needed help." I did, 30 minutes ago, but that pales in comparison to the customers themselves. First, I don't know how to fix a house, but the minute I put on that apron, everyone expects me to be some kind of skilled craftsman. I got paid $8 an hour. Do you think they taught me how to fix a bivalve? I don't even know what that is. So guess what, old people? Don't get mad at me when I don't know how to replace your water heater. I'm a cashier, not a plumber. One time, this old lady was unloading stuff from her cart onto the counter real slow, and I had scanned a few things, but I had to wait for her. Not many people know this, but cashiers are timed from the moment the first item is scanned, and I didn't want this lady to hurt my numbers, so I hit the button to start over. She saw me clear the screen and started yelling at me for slowing everything down. She was so mean for no reason. Actually, this was like 5 years ago. She might be dead now. Good! At the end of the summer, I was so ready to quit. I'd only been there for a couple of months, but a guy can only take so much abuse, okay? And on my last day, I realized, I can do anything. What are they gonna do, fire me? Here's a little secret. Cashiers where I worked could reduce the price of anything up to $50 without needing a manager's approval. I was so sick of being abused by customers that I initiated Project... Give everyone 10% off so they wouldn't yell at me over insignificant things and my last day wouldn't suck as much as it would otherwise, because seriously, people are so mean to cashiers. Why do they do that? .com. I kind of felt like Oprah. You get 10% off. You get 10% off. I'm invincible. Everything is free. Ha ha ha. It was a good day. Since I posted my last video, I've gotten 120,000 subscribers. At one point, I was the fastest growing channel in the world. Which is terrifying, but also amazing. All I can say is thank you to all you weirdos who thought it was a good idea to subscribe, and to James from The Odd Ones Out for sucking at Tetris.
I lost.
Yes! Yes! I'm also flattered that people are sending me fan art. Some kid even built a shrine to me. Which is actually troubling.
Stop it.
This story begins before I was born. The year is 1990, and a retired couple has just moved into a brand new home, only to discover, heavens to Betsy, it didn't come with any window blinds. So to make a little extra money, they decide to do some babysitting and put an ad in the newspaper. Back in my day, the internet came in the mail. Meanwhile, my mother was about to return to work after maternity leave. My brother and her brand new baby daughter, my sister, needed a daycare. My mom worked in sales at a greeting card company, so she spent a lot of time driving between stores to check what kinds of cards they were running out of. You know, happy birthday, sorry your grandma died, that sort of thing. But spending so much time in the car is not terribly fun. Me. So she started looking at various daycares, evaluating them, investigating if you will. You can't expect her to leave her brand new baby just anywhere. Maybe one of those used babies with a few scratches already, but the new ones need a screen protector at least. The first place Mom Tom visited was a licensed in-home daycare. The lady running the place warmly welcomed her in. She would have offered a place to sit if literally every surface wasn't piled high with papers, laundry, and various garbagey bits of garbage. A baby was crawling in a literal pile of dirt in the kitchen as a feral-looking dog stepped over him. Where did you get licensed? The back of a Walmart? In the words of Lemongrab, it was not great. And almost every place she went to had the same vibe or wasn't open late enough. After weeks of searching, she had nothing. Personally, I think the feral dog would have been a great babysitter, but what do I know? Eventually, she looked in the local newspaper where she found just one ad for childcare. Will babysit in your home 2 kids. And my mom was ecstatic. I can hardly contain myself. Now, I don't remember this because I didn't exist yet, but she called the number and asked the lady about babysitting and if they could meet up. In the background, you could hear her shout, "Dad, are we going anywhere today?" No. I guess after years of raising their own kids, Harry and Emma had just gotten used to calling each other Dad and Mom. They agreed to meet. So my mom dressed my sister up in the cutest pink dress she could find, hoping it would distract from her horns. And it worked. Emma would babysit, but just for a bit, you know, until she made enough to get blinds. Well, a few months turned into a few years. My mom got married, and soon after, I was born. Emma was there to give me my first gift, a stuffed blue bear. Later, when I learned to talk, the only other bear I knew was Winnie the Pooh, so I called him Blue Pooh. But Emma wasn't having any of this new baby business. She told my mom, "I can't watch another baby. You'll just have to find someone else." And find someone else she didn't. Unlike with my sister, this time her maternity leave ended the second we rolled out of the hospital. So if Emma wasn't gonna babysit me, I had no choice but to go to work. I may be only a week old, and I may be easily mistaken for a weird little potato, but my country, nay, my mommy needs me. My job was to sit in a comfy little stroller and sleep all day. A few days into Take Your Potato to Work month, a random lady came up and, without even asking, pulled the cover back on the stroller.
"Oh, let me see your baby." "Oh, well, I better go. I'm not feeling well."
What the shit? She just coughed in my little baby face. Needless to say, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. When Emma heard what happened, she said, "Well, you have no business taking that baby to work. You just leave him with me till you find someone else to look after him." And the way I like to tell the story is that's when she fell in love with me. A few weeks later, my mom still hadn't found anyone, and Emma goes, "Well, you just stop looking right now. You can find somebody when he's a little older. He doesn't need some stranger coming in here." For years, my mom would ask if she should find somebody else, and Emma would always say, "You hush and leave that baby here. My Timbird needs me." And now I'm gonna skip a few things to when I was 5 years old. My mom was single and struggling to support 3 kids on her own. So when she met a charming and successful guy who promised to give her the moon and let her quit her job to focus on raising us, she married him, and we moved to a town that might as well have been on the moon, it was so far away. Emma was such a big part of my life. From the moment I could talk, I always just called her grandma. She was my grandma. So moving away was devastating. I remember leaving her house in tears. "Grandma, it's so easy to come here, but it's so hard to go." Luckily, the guy my mom married turned out to be a total jerkwad. Before we moved into his house, he made us get rid of our dog. I know, that's bad enough, but there's more. When I was a kid, I was just bursting with affection. You're telling me this guy's my new dad? Hell yeah. One time I sat next to him on the couch and gave him a big hug. "I love you, Daddy," and he shoved me onto the floor. "I'm not your dad." And that's how I learned about emotional damage. One time, he told my sister to clean her room, and she did about as well as you'd expect a little kid, but she left some socks sticking out of the top of her dresser drawers. How terrible. Anyway, he thought that was a good excuse to unleash all of his pent-up rage. I remember hiding in my room and trying not to cry while I listened to him beat her. And I don't want to overstate it, because I know a lot of people had it worse. Like my sister. I just experienced a taste of trauma, and I turned out fine. At some point, my mom looked through his browser history and found that he had been on a dating site talking to other women. His username was something like Handyman1234. Okay. But the way she handled it was ice cold. She used *67 so her number wouldn't come up on his caller ID, and when he answered, she used a really flirty voice.
"Hi, Andy."
That's the best I can do. Anyway, he laughed and asked who it was, and it was hot and all my friends and I wanted was ice cream. But we were all broke teenagers with no summer jobs. So what's a group of desperate sugar-craving adolescents to do? Plan the greatest ice cream heist of all time, of course. Now, in our small town, there was a quaint ice cream shop run by a sweet old couple, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Their ice cream was legendary, and it was all we could think about. We needed a plan, a foolproof way to get our hands on some of that sweet, sweet, ice-cold goodness. Enter Jake, the mastermind of our group. He devised a plan so intricate and cunning it could only be the work of a teenage sugar addict. The plan was simple. Distract Mr. and Mrs. Johnson while the rest of us grabbed as much ice cream as we could carry. So we put our plan into action. Jake, being the smooth talker he was, struck up a conversation with the Johnsons about their secret ice cream recipe. Meanwhile, the rest of us, armed with our backpacks, snuck behind the counter.
Luckily, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were blind.
I swear, we moved like ninjas, silent and swift. We filled our bags with tubs of ice cream, our hearts pounding with adrenaline. We couldn't believe it was working. We were actually gonna pull it off. Suddenly, the door to the shop swung open, and who walked in but the town sheriff? We froze, the ice cream tubs still in our hands. Jake, ever the quick thinker, gestured for us to hide.
Only a genius could think of that.
We scrambled to the storage room, our hearts now pounding for a different reason. The sheriff sauntered up to the counter, exchanging pleasantries with the Johnsons. To our horror, he ordered a large scoop of the very flavor we had just swiped. Mrs. Johnson, bless her heart, started searching for the tub, her confusion growing as she realized it was missing. Jake, sensing our imminent doom, decided it was time for a Hail Mary. He whipped out his phone, pretending to receive a call. "What's that? A robbery at the bank? I'll be right there," he proclaimed, hanging up and informing the sheriff of the urgent situation.
A robbery? Quick, call an unemployed teen.
The sheriff, not one to shirk his duty, raced out of the shop, sirens blaring. With the coast clear, we snuck back out of the storage room, ice cream in tow, and made a hasty retreat to our hideout. At our secret clubhouse, we reveled in our success, gorging ourselves on the spoils of our heist. The ice cream tasted even sweeter, knowing we had outsmarted the law and pulled off the greatest ice cream heist in history. And as we sat there, our bellies full and our hearts content, we made a solemn pact. We would never speak of our crime, and our ice cream escapades would forever remain a secret. But now, years later, I share this tale with you, dear viewers.
Because I'm a dirty liar, apparently.
So let it be a lesson. Sometimes the sweetest victories come from the most daring and unexpected adventures.
Remember, kids, crime pays.
And if you're ever in our small town, be sure to visit Mr. and Mrs. Johnson's ice cream shop. Just make sure to pay for your...
And then it just gave up. I guess it only does about 600 words at a time. I don't know how I feel about an AI trying to frame me for crimes, but otherwise that was surprisingly good. So I just think it could have been funnier, but like on purpose. So I told it to try again, and this is what it came up with.
My unforgettable trip to the grocery store.
Now, we've all had those awkward moments in public, right? But I'm a bit of a specialist in that field. I'm like the Picasso of awkward moments, a true virtuoso. Let me tell you about the time I went to the grocery store and things went south real quick. So it was a normal day. I was doing my grocery shopping like the responsible adult I am. Well, sort of. I was actually in the frozen pizza section trying to figure out which one had the most cheese. Anyway, there I was, minding my own business, when out of nowhere I got a sneeze attack. You know, the kind that makes you look like a malfunctioning robot. Pizza, cheese, sneeze, sneeze, cheese. Now this sneeze attack was out of control, and I was grabbing tissues from my pocket like I was pulling rabbits out of a hat. And just when I thought I'd sneezed out half my brain, it stopped. But there was an eerie silence in the store, like everyone was just waiting for the other shoe to drop. I looked around, and sure enough, I had an audience. A whole sea of judgmental eyes just staring at me. I tried to play it cool, you know, give them a little smile, and went back to my important pizza decision-making. But fate wasn't done with me yet. Oh no. I reached out to grab my pizza, and my elbow hit a stack of canned corn behind me. You know that feeling when time slows down and you just know disaster is about to strike? That was me, watching that stack of corn cans tumble to the ground like the world's worst game of Jenga. It was a chain reaction. The corn cans rolled all over the place, causing other people to trip and drop their groceries. It was like a scene from a slapstick comedy. I had just turned the grocery store into a live-action version of Mario Kart.
A game famous for its canned corn.
Now, I couldn't leave without cleaning up the mess I'd made, right? So there I was, picking up cans, apologizing to everyone, and trying to put everything back in place. But wouldn't you know it, just when I thought I was in the clear, I dropped a jar of pickles on the floor. I mean, come on! At that point, I thought I was trapped in some sort of grocery store nightmare. So the jar shattered, pickles and glass all over the floor. It was a disaster. I must have turned 50 shades of red. But then this sweet old lady walked up to me, put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Honey, it's okay. At least you're not the one who sneezed all over the pizza section." I couldn't help but laugh. Sure, my ego was bruised and my face was probably redder than a ripe tomato, but you know what? Life's too short to worry about the little things. Sometimes you've just got to embrace the awkwardness and move on. So next time you find yourself in an embarrassing situation, just remember, you're not alone. There's a whole world of awkward people.
I used to work for VidCon. Not just as a volunteer, I was on staff year-round. And during the event, I was was one of only like a dozen people to have the rarest, most powerful executive staff black badge. When you're at VidCon with a black badge, you are a god. All of the security has to listen to you, all the special guests have to do what you say, only you have the power to say, "They're with me," and get anyone into any party. It's the best. Of course, the price you pay for that power is not having time to even sleep for an entire week as you run around putting out fires and making sure that everyone else is having fun. At my first VidCon, I was in charge of registration, so I spent most of my time front and center in the lobby. I was one of the only black badges that was in one place for more than like 10 seconds at a time, so when security saw someone with a counterfeit badge, they confiscated it and brought it to me. Time to put those black badge powers to work.
Attention all security, be on the lookout for counterfeit badges. We got cheap laminated photocopies in the wild. Please confiscate immediately. Over.
And then, as if I had announced a free ice cream giveaway for anyone wearing a security uniform, the sky blackened with guards bringing me counterfeit badges. By which I mean like 4 guards walked over and handed me some counterfeits, but they were big dudes. It was scary. So I had this pile of fakes, and I began some detective work. At this point, I don't have much information to go on. This line of work will chew you up and spit you out if you let it. Curious, several of the counterfeits look identical, clearly made by the same person. A dangerous madman was on the loose, and it was up to me to stop him. I had my wife to think about, but she knows the dangers that come with the badge. Just kidding, I'm single. Eventually, security escorted 2 girls over to me who had counterfeits matching the others. I told them they weren't in trouble, I just wanted to find out where the fakes were coming from. We found them? Don't lie to me, where are the others? And they must have been terrified that I transformed into Batman before their very eyes because they start describing the guy who sold them the badges. He has red hair, he's going bald, he has a gray backpack, and wouldn't you know it, someone matching that description starts coming down the escalator behind them. So I go, that guy? And dear viewer, you'll never guess what their answer was. Yep. Go, go, go! Security swarms the bottom of the escalator. Everyone is yelling conflicting orders. Stay there, follow me, sit down, stand up. It's a total mess. So I wade into this mosh pit at the bottom of the escalator and yell, "Everyone shut up!" I stared deep into that dirtbag's tattered soul. He thought he could get away with it. Not today, pal. Not today. Sir, on these premises, your bag is subject to search. I'm gonna have you sit over there and we're gonna search your bag. So he followed me back to the registration booth and I opened his bag to find quite the stack of counterfeit badges. We called the police to deal with him and he was arrested. I really like computers, so at school, I quickly became the computer kid, which was fine, but I always felt like I was so much more than that, you know? One thing that helped was a project I did in the 6th grade. Our teacher split the class into 3 groups. We were gonna make movies. Whoa. My friend Scott and I wrote our group script about a nerdy kid who wins a basketball game and finally gains the respect of his whole class. You know, because obviously I knew how it felt to be liked by everyone, and I just wanted to show everyone else. I played the main character, and since I was the only one who knew how to use the camera, I also ended up filming and editing the whole thing. I was a little upset that I did so much by myself, so I put my name in the credits like a dozen times. When everyone finished their movie, we threw a little red carpet premiere so parents could come and watch. My mom couldn't get off work, so I was kinda on my own. While the seats filled up, it hit me that this would be the first time anyone else had seen mine, and I got really nervous that people would hate it. I worked so hard, but I had never done this before, and my name was all over it. If it was bad, everyone would know that I was bad. So I sat in the back of the room while everyone watched. I couldn't really tell what they thought, but when it finished, they clapped. They really seemed to like it, and the best part was when my crush said that my movie was her favorite. Hi, Morgan! I was still the computer kid, but now I was also kinda the video kid, when I wanted to be. It felt cool. In the 8th grade, I met Jeremy, who introduced me to Rob. They were into filmmaking too, and Jeremy had a camera. So after school, we'd make little sketches for Jeremy's channel. He had almost 30 subscribers, which I remember thinking was a lot. Also, his mom made us use fake names, and I guess I didn't pick mine fast enough because suddenly, and without being consulted, I became Barry. We never got a ton of views, but that didn't matter. We were having fun.
I wasn't always the most confident in school, but I was the video kid, so I felt like I could try things, even if they were pretty cringy. Like in one video, I had to run down a path where there was a bunch of branches in my way. I ducked and dodged, but it's not totally clear what I'm doing, so it looks like I just run weird. But then I do a totally sick parkour roll, so I guess that makes up for it. I was embarrassed by those videos for a long time, but now it's fun to look back and see how far I've come. Besides, I had nothing to be embarrassed about. Making stuff is always cool. Luckily, Jeremy didn't delete his channel, but most of the vlogs and sketches and claymation things I made when I was younger are gone forever because I didn't think they were good enough. Which is dumb because everything I learned making stuff for fun got me a job working for a YouTuber I really admire, Hank Green. He's the guy who started VidCon. I was so excited to move out of my mom's house, I made sure to take everything I owned with me. I got my dream job, and now I was a VidCon employee. Everything clicked into place. It was like the random projects and videos I had been making for fun had actually been designed to make me the best life I could imagine all along. I felt really lucky to be there, even if I didn't fit in too well. My coworkers were really nice. I was just way younger than them. This was my first real job, and I was living on my own for the first time, so I was figuring out how to grocery shop while they were having kids. We were at different stages in life, but it was so hard for me to see at the time. Like, I'm the only one who doesn't have things figured out. What's wrong with me? And since I was new in town, I didn't know anyone outside of work. One time I went to a computer meetup thing to hopefully find some people my age, but like 3 old dudes showed up who already knew each other, and I guess they weren't very good with computers after all because I never got the invite to the next one. I was pretty lonely. But this is my dream job. This is as good as it gets. I'll never find anything this good ever again. I should be happy. Why aren't I happy? One day, on a whim, I asked my boss something like, if I quit, how much would that mess things up for you? I think part of me was hoping he'd say, you can't quit, we need you, but he didn't. We talked about everything I'd need to do before leaving. We even decided what my final day would be, and before I knew it, it was over. After more than 2 years, I wasn't a VidCon employee anymore. I really did like working there, and my coworkers really were so good. I didn't even know what I was going to do next, but I was quitting my dream job. What was I thinking? After my last workday, I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment with my mom. She had come to help me pack, and as the boxes filled up, it hit me that I had just thrown away the best thing that would ever happen to me, and there really was no going back. My mom let me stay with her until I figured out what was next, so we moved all of my stuff back to her house. One morning, my mom came in and asked if I had been on the phone in the night, but when I told her I fell asleep really quickly, she said, "Oh, it sounded like you were saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." I was straight up crying in my sleep. Leaving was supposed to make me feel better, but I didn't even know who I was anymore. So I told myself that quitting VidCon would be the biggest mistake of my life, until I made something better happen. Working there taught me enough about the inner workings of YouTube that I was pretty sure I could be a YouTuber, and I got to work. I tried a few things, but eventually decided that I like telling stories the most. A few animated story channels were suddenly doing well too, so it seemed like a smart move. I spent a month planning things out, writing scripts, and sending audio clips to everyone I knew to get their opinions. I didn't know how to draw yet, but I did have a theory. When it came to the types of videos I wanted to make, the visuals might just be the least important part. It doesn't matter how beautiful a video is, if the story is bad, nobody will want to watch. And I had listened to enough podcasts to know that stories could be incredibly entertaining with just audio. As everything shaped up, I became convinced. This would work. I had never been the art kid before, but I wasn't gonna let that stop me, so I did something recklessly optimistic and spent almost all of my savings on a drawing tablet. Now this had to work.
I'm gonna teach you a thing about YouTube.
When you first create a channel, the videos you upload aren't recommended. YouTube doesn't know who will like them or how much they'll watch, so starting fresh can be hard. Before you get in recommended, you first need to get enough organic views that
the algorithm
can decide how good your videos are.
Okay, back to the story.
I uploaded my first animated story and tried my best to promote it. It got a couple hundred views and people seemed to like it, but it didn't get any recommended traffic. I posted my second video, promoted it more, and people liked it too, but no recommendations yet. I thought they were genuinely entertaining, I just needed to get them in front of more people. There was a channel with over 1 million subscribers that would sometimes collab with people who were just starting out, which seemed like a good bet. I emailed him and asked if he would read lines for me. I used to work for Hank Green after all, so I kinda know what I'm doing, but he said no. So I said, please? He agreed, but later I found out that it was just because he thought I could get him into VidCon. Like, I quit. I couldn't even get myself into VidCon. Jaden told me that when she saw my first video, she was like, holy crap, how did he start good? Which was so nice. Little did she know. Anyway, I worked as hard as I could to make my third video awesome. I stressed over every detail and even spent a whole day on the thumbnail so I didn't waste the opportunity. Then one morning I woke up in really bad pain. I didn't have health insurance, and even though I didn't have too many expenses, thanks Mom, the reckless optimist in me had just gone all in to buy equipment. I couldn't afford to go to the hospital, but the pain got worse, and that night my mom had to take me to the emergency room. Turns out that everything was fine, I just needed to eat more fiber. It helps you poop. What can I say? Being super stressed out does weird things to you. So I loaded up on Metamucil because suddenly I had a huge hospital bill to worry about. This had to work now. In all honesty, I should have stopped. I should have switched to plan B, get a job at the first place that hired me, go back to college, and stop wasting time. But I had spent more than 2 years working for a YouTuber. I learned firsthand what it takes, and I couldn't let myself throw all that away for nothing. There was a part of me that just wanted to give up. I don't want to get too dark, but honestly, there's been a lot of times that I really wanted to give up. And this was one of them. I told my mom, and if there's one thing she was right about, it's that you never know what tomorrow will bring. She always says that. Thanks, Mom. So I finished the video. There had been a few dozen collabs like this before me. The most viewed one at the time had about 100,000 views, and the lucky ones got an impressive 5% of people to subscribe, so it seemed like the best case scenario was that I might get 5,000 subscribers. I tried not to get my hopes up, though. That first week, I gained almost 600 subscribers from being in a collab playlist, which was awesome. I remember sitting at dinner with my mom and cheering when I hit 700. Then things started to slow down, but
the algorithm
must have finally gathered enough data to decide how much to recommend my videos, and I guess it decided that everybody should see this because suddenly all 3 of my videos were being recommended like crazy. The next week, I rocketed to 1 million views out of nowhere, and a whopping 10% decided to subscribe. Thanks for that, by the way. Everyone has those moments where just when it looks like things can't get any worse, they do. Which is like, what the heck, life? But the opposite is true too. After years of trying to figure out who I am and sometimes having to fight really hard to not give up entirely, the pieces eventually came together. I'm still the computer kid, and the video kid. I never would have guessed that I'd become the art kid, let alone the YouTube kid, but now I get to be all of those people and more. Sometimes I still want to give up, but by now I've learned not to. Like my mom always says, you never know. I've been incredibly lucky that pretty much every teacher I've ever had was great. There were a handful that I didn't get along with, but it was never anything too bad. Except in one instance. One of my elementary school teachers completely ruined school for me. Teachers are such a big part of kids' lives, and I don't think she handled my education with nearly enough care. Now, this was a long time ago, and I'm hopeful that by now she doesn't have this effect on students anymore. But I wasn't articulate enough in the 6th grade to properly express just how awful she made me feel, so I'm gonna do past me a solid and have a little rant about my least favorite teacher. Strap in, folks! My school had this program called GATE, which stands for Gifted and Talented Education. Every now and then, a GATE teacher would make their way around every classroom and scoop up the GATE kids to go, I don't know, play with tangrams for an hour. Eventually, the school decided that regularly interrupting classes wasn't a great idea, so they created the 4-5 combo class. About a dozen kids each from the 4th and 5th grades would go share a classroom and have an accelerated curriculum year-round. The next year, that group of kids stayed with the same teacher and became the 5-6 combo class. And the next year, when the 6th graders went off to junior high, the younger kids took their place at the top of the class and a new wave of 5th graders joined. I entered the GATE program with that initial group of 4th graders, which means that I was in the combo class for 3 years. Usually, if you have a teacher that you don't get along with, you only have to deal with them for 1 year. But I had the worst teacher I've ever had for 3 years. If that doesn't deserve a rant, I don't know what does. Let's call her Mrs. K for Karen. You know the type. I've talked to a handful of kids from the combo class in the years since, and it's not like I've been scientific with my data collection, but the pattern that I've noticed is that all the girls seem to have loved her, and all the guys seem to have hated her. I don't know what that means, but I detect bias. The combo class had 2 teachers, and when we needed to split up for grade-specific things, our other teacher would take the older kids. Let's call her Mrs. A for awesome. So during the final year in the class, I would occasionally get a break from the ever-present dread that Mrs. K caused, like a glass of water in the Sahara Desert. That might be a little dramatic, but that's how I felt. And you know what? Just because you're young doesn't mean your feelings aren't real. Mrs. K was an adult in a position of extreme power. She got to decide if we could go to the bathroom or not. More than anything, it was her responsibility to be like, hey, I feel like we're not getting along. What can we do to build trust? But instead, she straight up bullied me until I cried on several occasions, spilled soda all over my copy of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and then denied it, even though I watched her and was just generally mean for 3 years. For example, one time near the end of the school year, Mrs. A planned a little after-school celebration. She took everyone's order for McDonald's during the day, and then that evening we all came back to the school, ate dinner, and had a little party. Told you she was awesome. All of the kids trickled in and were sitting in a circle talking. Everyone was pretty loud, but this was uncharted territory. An empty school? Neat! So when Mrs. A tried to get everyone's attention, they just didn't hear her. But when she went to stand up and talk louder, Mrs. K stopped her. I was sitting right next to them, so I could hear Mrs. K say something to the effect of, nope, just wait, they'll figure it out. She was was deliberately telling Mrs. A to be passive-aggressive. Who does that? Even as a kid, that seemed obviously dumb. So I did what I still think is one of the most mature things I've ever done. It was time for Project Get Their Attention. .net. I shouted, "Hey everybody!" and about half of the kids looked at me. Now, as a kid who grew up pretty poor, I was always told to pay attention to how much things cost when I ordered food at restaurants. I was keenly aware of the fact that Mrs. A had just spent at least $40,000 to buy nuggets and burgers for the entire class. I said something like, "It's cool that Mrs. A took everyone's favorite orders and brought us all McDonald's. Now, many teachers would do that, so I think she deserves a round of applause." And when half of the kids started clapping, the rest joined in and started paying attention too. I love it when a plan comes together. Then I said something like, "Now we need to be quiet so Mrs. A can pass all our food out because I don't know about you, but I'm hungry." I don't think Mrs. K appreciated being shown up by a literal child, but maybe that wouldn't have happened if she wasn't deliberately being passive-aggressive. One time I wrote a story about how a kid was having a bad day and their teacher made it worse by being petty and mean. I wonder where I got the idea. This wasn't for an assignment or anything, I just wrote it for fun. But when I was done, I was so excited that I had finished a full story that I showed it to Mrs. A. But Mrs. K ended up reading it too, and it was pretty obviously about her, which she didn't like. Instead of doing the responsible thing and using this opportunity to see things from my perspective, and perhaps taking a moment to think about what she could do on her side to build some trust and form a healthier and more productive relationship with one of her students, she got real mad and called a parent-teacher conference. So my mom and I sat down with her one day after school and she went through all of the things that really concerned her. But it was clear that she was just personally offended for being called out. Luckily, my mom was like, "Yeah, I don't see any problem here." There was something that happened that my friends and I didn't handle well, but instead of talking to everyone involved and maybe teaching us how we could have handled it better, like a teacher is supposed to, Mrs. K chose to humiliate my friend group in front of the entire class. There were about 6 of us who had become pretty close friends. Basically, we'd always hang out at recess and ask each other really deep philosophical questions like, wouldn't it be weird if milk was green? But then we'd realize that it wouldn't, because if milk was green, then that would be normal, and white milk would be weird. Whoa. One time I used the phrase personal space bubble, and someone thought the word bubble was particularly funny for some reason. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but it became an inside joke, and before long we ended up just calling our group the Bubble. But it turns out that names are a powerful thing, and after a few months, the entire class knew that we had one. And they wanted in. We never set out to be exclusionary. It was just an inside joke that other kids overheard. So when someone who none of us knew very well came up at lunch and asked if he could join the Bubble, it was like, that's not really how this works. He just wanted to make friends, but it was a question that we hadn't even considered, and for lack of a more thoughtful response, we kind of just awkwardly told him no. That rejection really upset him, especially after he must have worked up the courage to come ask us in the first place. So he went, crying, to Mrs. K. Instead of taking us aside and talking to us about what happened in private, she called us out in front of the entire class. She said something to the effect of, "I've been hearing all about the Bubble for months, and now I understand that you're going around and telling kids that they can't be in it." Then I'll never forget that she pointed at me and said, "I'm popping the Bubble." What does that even mean? She didn't talk through things with us and set reasonable expectations. She was just like, "Yep, I popped the Bubble. Problem solved." If she had taken the time to understand what was really going on, then she could have helped us work through a better way to handle it and set a good example for the class. But no, she singled us out in front of everyone and set a terrible example. Now how am I supposed to be a good person? Sorry for getting so